Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
To lose everything, to hate and live only for revenge, each day sinking deeper and deeper into darkness. To turn away from friends and teachers, to mix yourself with dirt, to want to feel the blood of the most hated and dearest person in this indifferent world on your hands. To live, wishing him death, and then to lose this meaning forever and regret. Regret until the very end. Itachi died long ago, and with him everything else. Sasuke wondered what would have happened if his brother's lie had never turned into a coma. And the truth had not washed over him like an icy lake, from under which there was no way to get out. Sasuke did not want to get out. He gave himself entirely to the darkness that served as a grave for his soul. He was carried away into the darkest depths, where the bottom would never be found, where Itachi would never be found. Light and duty bound Sasuke to Konoha, Sasuke to this world. This connection pulled one half of his soul upward. Sasuke has been alive for 32 years. The war is over for the world, and it will never be over for it. To forget the past is to betray the clan, the parents, himself, and Itachi. Sometimes Sasuke wondered what Itachi looked like. And he realized with horror that he was forgetting his brother's features. His face was almost erased, dissolved somewhere in the subconscious. Itachi was always too far to reach. Kind eyes, smile, caring brother. Ruthless, cold, hateful killer. Love and hatred for him were intertwined with hostility, but then they were replaced by melancholy. With each passing year, the word brother became discolored, became gray, capable of causing only melancholy and sadness, which sadly and tirelessly cut the soul. The mistake due to the lie of his brother and his own blind rage, which Sasuke could never correct, pulled the other half of the soul deep inside like an anchor. Sasuke has been dead for 16 years. The fire crackled. Itachi was very close to Sasuke. Reach out and you'll touch his shoulder. Silence reigned for 15 minutes. The brothers looked at the lively dancing flame of the fire. Actually, there was something to talk about. A lot. But the words were born in their heads and immediately disappeared, like ashes scattered in the wind. Sasuke looked at his brother, in whose eyes the flames were jumping. I forgave you a long time ago, Itachi, Sasuke said. Itachi leaned forward slightly, then turned just as carefully to Sasuke. A minute later, he sat down opposite him. Itachi peered closely. Of course, Sasuke thought, Itachi has poor eyesight. His eyes, as usual, reflected fatigue, reminded him of the past. Previously, hatred and anger would have risen in his soul. Now, looking into his brother's eyes, Sasuke felt pain and resentment. Not for himself, but for him. What have you had to endure, brother? Sasuke swallowed, choking back the emotions that were rising. Now, I'm like you. I endure, brother, and it turns out badly. Are you sure of your words? Itachi asked innocently and quietly. Yes, it was hard to believe in forgiveness. All this time, Itachi had seen only growing hatred in Sasuke. But Sasuke had forgiven him long ago, too long ago. He wanted to ask Itachi how long he would live in the past, blame himself and hate. But Sasuke couldn't do that. The answer would hurt Itachi, because he still didn't believe in forgiveness. He didn't believe it, but he certainly wanted to believe it. Sasuke could read it in his eyes. In his brother's eyes. I forgave, Sasuke repeated, barely audible, very weakly. Itachi blinked, and then smiled weakly. His usual smile. It had been so long since he had seen it. Why does it still hurt, Itachi? Sasuke felt a light tap on his forehead. His breathing stopped, and the past flashed before his eyes. The final battle, I'm sorry, Sasuke, the rain, the trembling and his brother, he falls, disappears, and everything stops. Passed out or dead? His barely noticeable smile and his last words. A chill suddenly crept up his shoulders. Stupid, Itachi's voice spilled out of the silence. Reality returned. The older brother was across from me. Alive. But he should be dead. Dead for 16 years. A dream. What were they talking about? Sasuke knew, they talked until there was a silent pause, but about what, he couldn't remember. Itachi wanted to get up, but Sasuke suddenly grabbed his hand. As if he didn't stop his brother now, he would leave forever and never come back. His face would be forgotten forever, and it would be impossible to remember, even if you tried. Sasuke tugged his brother's hand. Itachi staggered and his face came even closer. What's in his eyes? Pain, confusion, questions? Disbelief that he deserved forgiveness for his mistakes? Sasuke couldn't figure it out. Was it really possible to see only coldness, indifference, and obsession in his brother's eyes all the time? Why, Sasuke wondered, couldn't he see suffering and fear? He felt Itachi trembling, balancing on the edge between black and white, as if, having taken a step, he would stumble and fall down. Sasuke squeezed Itachi's wrist. He wanted to hug his brother the same way he once hugged him deeply in childhood, when he said that he would protect him. Sasuke leaned forward, but suddenly touched Itachi's lips with a kiss. And froze. He didn't immediately realize what he had done, but quickly pulled away. It was just a dream. Itachi was a dream. Itachi had died long ago. He was gone. Sasuke gritted his teeth, not daring to take his eyes off his brother. No, not his brother. His own illusion. Why did it all happen this way, Itachi? He asked in a choked voice. Itachi opened his mouth slightly, but could not answer. He looked into Sasuke's eyes and said nothing. Then he lowered his head. His shoulders shook, and Sasuke froze in defeat. Itachi was crying. Sasuke shuddered and woke up. His heart was pounding wildly, and his muscles had turned to stone from the tension. A saving breath, and the noise of blood in his ears gradually died down, simultaneously letting through the chirping of crickets and the distant yapping of a wild fox. The Uchiha was completely alone, near an old tree, in the roots, where he decided to stop after sunset. The fire was still crackling in front of him, which meant he hadn't slept for very long. Sasuke touched his forehead and remembered the dream. And again, as if petrified, he froze. Itachi. He rarely appeared in my dreams now. Sasuke felt his face twist. A kiss. Why and for what purpose? It became disgustingly vile. Sasuke shook his head, driving away unpleasant thoughts. He stood up, nervously kicked the flames of the fire and threw the previously torn turf on top. He took the katana and, shaking off his cloak, left this place. The yapping of the fox stopped, replaced by the hooting of an owl. The forest did not stop living, and Sasuke did not disturb its peace, stepping softly on the mossy ground. He needed to get to the village. To hell with rest. Especially now it would be difficult to fall asleep. Sasuke again drove away thoughts of sleep. Ridiculous sleep. Absurd sleep. Uchiha stopped and listened to himself. There was a seething in his chest, something was languishing and shifting anxiously. The dream was blackening the memory of Itachi. Sasuke felt anger waking up. But then the anger was replaced by resentment. Itachi's face, which he saw so clearly in the dream, could not be reproduced in reality. His brother's face was practically plunged into the darkness of memory, and the more often Sasuke remembered, the more his brother's features wore out, turning him into a light haze. One day, the memory itself would disappear, and only a memory of a memory would remain. That was what made it offensive. Sasuke knew that this would happen. He knew from his own experience. Uchiha reached the village by morning. His quick steps and self-criticism had shortened the time. He only felt tired when he stopped in the middle of a country road. The huts, more like burrows, were monotonous. They differed only in the half-abandoned gardens laid out under the windows. Sasuke walked a little forward and turned into the guest house, the only building that differed from the others. Even now, when peace and stability reigned once again, the village was in such decline that it seemed as if no one cared about it. Naruto probably hadn't even heard of its problems. There was only one table occupied inside the guest house. Two thin men were arguing in hushed tones. They cast suspicious glances at the guest, fell silent for a while, but then began arguing again. Sasuke settled himself at the furthest table, from which he could clearly see the entire hall. He ordered breakfast and listened. Sometimes you could learn a lot from rumors. For example, where the disturber of the peace and serenity of the modern world could be found lately. The old men were arguing about the war. One said that it was about to start, the other said that peace had come. Sasuke sighed. The second was right, but what was going on in the first's head was unclear. The war had recently ended, and the countries were unlikely to start another one, at least not now. Breakfast was brought. "Tell me," Uchiha asked the plump-legged worker, "where can I find Osanakiya?" "Osanakiya?" the woman asked, her eyes wide. Sasuke looked at her. "Yes, Osanakiya," he repeated clearly, without taking his eyes off her. The woman shook her head. What did he do again? Sasuke didn't understand the meaning of her expression. More precisely, he wondered to himself why she was saying that the head of this wretched village had done something. He was silent for a while, then took out a scroll and placed it on the table in front of him. Kia hired Konoha to deal with the criminals. The woman threw up her hands in a crushing gesture, her bulging eyes boring into the scroll as if it were something dangerous. "Just think. Hired? Konoha?" she exclaimed. The arguing old men immediately fell silent and directed their faded eyes towards Sasuke. "So, how will he pay?" The woman shook her head again, wailing disgustingly. Sasuke inhaled. "He has already paid." "How?" Her eyes were ready to pop out. Sasuke frowned. The woman was not acting very patriotically towards her own village chief. "Where can I find him?" Sasuke repeated the question. The woman threw up her hands again, shaking her head. She turned out to be one of those personality types that irritates from the first minutes. It was as if the woman was deliberately dragging out time in order to talk to at least someone longer. "Probably stole again. The bastard, he definitely won't get away with it now." "Oh," she suddenly switched to Sasuke, who was patiently waiting for her answer. "It's okay, the boss has to sort it out." Sasuke frowned even more. Maybe the woman was crazy? His suspicions were dashed when the old man addressed her. "What has Osana done again?" "Shinobi hired from Konoha." "Konoha?" The old man was surprised and, also turning pale, looked at Sasuke. The woman began to wail again. "There's no money anyway, and this little one. Well, how could he hire him?" "He's only 5 years old," the old man laughed uncertainly. Sasuke glanced sharply in his direction. "A lousy child. Someday he will destroy us all. You urgently need to talk to our leader." Sasuke looked at the scroll, where there was a request from Kia himself, which Naruto signed, and even entrusted to Sasuke. All that was left was to sigh. "Okay, where can I find your leader?" The village chief turned out to be a very decrepit man, just like the house where he lived out his last days, from which he went out onto the porch for so long. The old man said that he did not hire Konoha, there would not have been enough money. And they had no problems yet. But Osanakiya really turned out to be a child. Everything that was happening boiled down to the idea of a trap. Sasuke thought that someone was waiting, maybe they were already following him. The old man kept wailing, apologizing, although he had nothing to do with it. Sasuke listened to him with one ear, thinking that this could have been a joke from Naruto. But why did he need that? "Everything is fine here for now," the leader waved his hand and, after a pause, added, "Only the Akatsuki, should we be wary, or not?" "What have we heard about them?" Sasuke frowned, and then the meaning of that last sentence dawned on him. He looked at the old man. "Akatsuki?" The old man nodded, his voice hoarse and feeble. "Will there be a war?" Akatsuki and war. Suspicions were creeping into his head more and more. What if, Uchiha thought, this was no joke, what if he was already trapped? Or he was still asleep? "Sorry," Sasuke nodded and tried to leave the old man. The latter, saying goodbye and apologizing, followed him. "So what about the war?" the old man asked again. Sasuke turned and asked about today's date. The old man didn't immediately understand how the question was related to his question, but he answered. Sasuke froze and quickly calculated the difference in dates. 17 years. Now it was clear why the hostess of the guest house, the old men, and the village chief had behaved so strangely. Why the village was so impoverished. Sasuke clutched the mission scroll in his hand. Clearly, he was trapped. But when? It won't be possible to dispel the technique, it's not Jinjutsu. So you have to find your way back yourself. And suddenly my whole body felt as if an electric discharge had passed through it. A wave of pricking goosebumps ran through me, and I felt cold and shivering. Itachi spun around in his subconscious. If today is NN.NN.NN, then in a few months he, 16 years old, will meet his brother. If that's true, then Itachi is still alive. Here. Sasuke let out a shaky breath and turned around. The forest, damp with dew, gave off a feeling of darkness, loneliness, and hostility. Itachi, still alive, thundered in his head again. His brother was somewhere out there in the darkness, maybe even wandering through this forest. Sasuke looked up at the blackening sky. In some ways, the situation could be called funny. Ironic. Without thinking twice, Sasuke headed into the forest. Leaving so quickly? I won't be able to pay Konoha. The old man responded. No need. After some time, the old man made another effort, and his voice became even more hoarse. You won't stay? It can be dangerous in the forest. Especially at night. Everything is fine. Sasuke left the village. His mouth was dry, his legs were still shaking. It seemed like he was about to meet his older brother halfway. Living brother. Just a day ago, Sasuke would have found him himself if he were alive. But now, the opportunity that had presented itself was shaking his confidence. A chill ran through him. Uchiha stretched his hand out in front of him, noticing a small, unpleasant tremor. He stopped and listened to his still rapid heartbeat. So fast, so exciting. Something was pulling down. My stomach was twisting. A semblance of numbness. I wanted to sit down, curl up, and at the same time I wanted to run. Sasuke didn't break away, didn't run through the forest, noticing anything. He walked slowly, calmly. But inside, it was as if a hurricane was raging, and nothing could be done about it. He needed to find a way to return as soon as possible, leaving this past behind. And he also needed to try to ignore thoughts of Itachi. Itachi, who was still alive. Returning back, breaking free from the unreality, the mirage that was once real, was not easy. Sasuke's unreality was his memories. Memories he was living in now. It seemed that with each passing day the past became more hostile and merciless. What was happening still resembled a dream, a nightmare in which nothing could be done. In which all that remained was to run and not turn around. If you could escape from a nightmare by waking up, then to escape from the past, you had to find a technique. About 4 years ago, Sasuke had heard about a technique that either returned or threw you into the past. The name of the one who owned it kept eluding him. It was like chasing a ghost. A day passed, 2, 3. Sasuke searched. But in the end he only got a haze of possibility of return. Time was now stretched, now accelerated. Villages were replaced by camps, camps by settlements, settlements by cities. Another rainy day brought Uchiha to one of the passing villages, surrounded by a log fence. Sasuke remained waiting at the entrance gate, hiding under a fairly wide roof. 16 years later, he would be here again. He would also come here in the rain, he would also wait at the entrance until the downpour ended. He did not remember what had made him think about the past, in which his brother left the last touch on his forehead, which turned into blood. And the last words, muffled by the downpour and the crackling of black flames, all this would be forever imprinted in his memory. Amaterasu inevitably destroys everything. Itachi is like a black flame. It burns, but gives neither heat nor light. Amaterasu was supposed to protect Sasuke, even if it caused physical pain. Like Itachi, whom Sasuke once hated more than his own powerlessness. Sasuke closed his eyes and leaned the back of his head against the post. For a second everything around was illuminated and almost immediately there was a thunder. The rain only increased its pounding on the roof. The wind blew, and rare drops fell at Sasuke's feet. Nature was raging. The cold was creeping under his clothes, making him shiver. Sasuke shivered and turned towards the houses. The village was immediately illuminated by another flash, the sky began to rumble long and hard. And Sasuke suddenly froze. Between the houses, further away, a shadow flashed. alien and too dark to figure out who it belonged to. But something seemed to jump from it to Sasuke like a thread and tightly wrapped around his body, soul, and thoughts. And again, numbness. His legs were cramping. Sasuke stepped back, leaned harder against the support post, and held his breath. In the first second, the thought flashed, brother. In the next, just a stranger. Sasuke found himself in a guest house, where the stormy evening darkness immediately dissipated under the cozy light of lanterns hanging from the ceiling. The hall was filled with several noisy unfamiliar faces, among whom a man in a black, wet cloak was already milling about. Not Itachi, Sasuke thought. A wave of unpleasantly pricking needles spread through his body. Sasuke sat down at the empty table, looking towards the stranger. He burst out laughing. The laughter was immediately picked up by the men standing nearby. Uchiha exhaled in displeasure and looked away. He didn't feel anything, but he thought about what would happen if he did meet his brother. He would probably tense up. Weakness spread through his body and fatigue fell upon him. Sasuke decided to spend the night here, having given himself a rest for the last 4 days. The morning greeted him with dampness. Unfriendly, gray, giving off a dull melancholy that intensified after a hard, half-sleepless night. Sasuke, yawning, went out onto the porch. The floorboards were still damp. In the distance hung a slightly cloudy haze, through which the forest could be seen. The stranger from yesterday rushed past with a brisk gait. Sasuke managed to catch a glimpse of his red, round face, which was covered with wrinkles. And how could he confuse him with Itachi? The Uchiha frowned and tried to recall his brother's facial features. A blurry half-smile and some reflection of pain, that was all that his memory allowed him to see. But the flashing memories of his brother now, like mad dogs, bit with fangs from all sides and tore. Something seemed to be strangling, hanging on his shoulders. Sasuke realized that it had started the previous evening and now it refused to let go. He walked down the steps, looking towards the distant mountains where the dark clouds were disappearing. I just need to go back, Sasuke told himself. He frowned again, preparing to resume his search. The way was open, all that remained was to continue on. The man he needed was already very close. Return seemed a welcome inevitability, promised by something powerful. But Sasuke stood near the guest house, did not move from his place and looked at the road along which yesterday's stranger had left. The road was supposed to lead to the city through a field, through a sunny forest and carefree babbling rivers. The road home. But it seemed that there was a completely different one nearby, the opposite one, narrow, like a path. A path leading deep into the darkness, where Itachi had been wandering practically all his life. If I find the technology, I will never see my brother again. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. For a moment, silence enveloped him. And then Sasuke turned sharply. It was that moment when something inside you turns over. A click and you are ready to breathe differently, deciding to take the first step. The tenacious hooks beckoned Sasuke to turn. Quietly, without telling anyone, hiding a terrible secret, he stepped onto the path. It was as if Uchiha was looking into the darkness. It seemed to him that he could see his brothers back in the dark forest. Sasuke was reaching out to something forbidden, distant and secretly desired, to the time in which Itachi lived. The brother he had come to know too late, the brother he had admired as a child, the brother who had been dying since he had carried out his last mission in the hated Konoha. Konoha. Maybe it was self-deception? The past cannot be changed. And memories must remain memories. Sasuke did not give himself an account. Did he regret his past mistakes, or did he come to terms with them? He felt neither one nor the other. The only thing he knew now was that he needed to find his brother. Sasuke stopped among the gnarled trees. It smelled of dampness and moss. A wall of damp silence rolled in and out like waves in a stormy sea. Konoha, the former Team 7, all the villagers were now separated by gnarled, unfriendly trees and time. Sasuke did not turn around. The familiar croak of a forest raven was heard somewhere above the rustling tops of old spruce trees. As if it announced loneliness. Sasuke breathed freely, but still did not get rid of the heaviness. He moved further, trying to imagine where Itachi could be. I had to slow down and close my eyes. Where would Itachi go now, after the stormy night? These thoughts slipped away as quickly and unnoticed as dreams from sunlight. Sasuke stopped and placed his palm on the bark of a nearby tree. His gaze moved to the soft moss under his feet. But Uchiha did not see its play of color, from green to black. He did not feel the softness of the green and did not notice anything at all. A transparent drop broke on the surface of his hand. Sasuke briefly looked at his hand, lowered it and walked on. We need to find Itachi. Just to see him, and then. Sasuke was increasingly mixed with excitement, disbelief, some secret fear and anger. Or maybe he just thought so. But the more time passed, the more the internal storm grew. Sasuke thought that if he relaxed, he would start tossing from side to side so mercilessly that he would break. Sasuke had been searching for his brother for a week now. His excitement waxed and waned. A new dawn screamed that Itachi was even closer to death. Sasuke got up, had breakfast and continued searching. He recognized the place as well. He walked a lot every day, much more than in reality. He ignored the fatigue and pain in his legs. The hidden fear mixed with excitement and anger often weakened during the day, but intensified at night and especially in the morning. Sometimes the search seemed like madness. Thoughts of meeting his brother who had died several years ago made him despair. Itachi was closer than ever, and further than he actually was. Sometimes he wanted to give up the search, but realizing the momentary desire, he felt even more madness. He thought that maybe, walking along a dark path, he could return to the beginning of the mistake he had made and then, perhaps, correct at least his attitude towards her. Hope flared at such thoughts, but the next moment Sasuke grew gloomier. Itachi was dead, he reminded himself, and even someone who knew everything that would happen in the next few months here would be unable to do anything. Sasuke gritted his teeth, pushed the hopelessness away, and resumed his search. The faster the days passed, the more insane Uchiha became. He ran and again could not find his brother. He was now being mercilessly thrown from side to side. But even if he was destined to crash, he had to find him. Sasuke once stopped near a clearing in front of a cliff. Out of breath, he leaned against a tree, took out a flask and took a couple of sips of water. The Uchiha caught a slight breeze on his face, looked at the slowly floating clouds in the blue sky and listened. The leaves rustled, the grass rustled. A forest bird sang in the distance. The sun played in the greenery, but before his eyes stood the vague silhouette of his brother, darkening everything around him. Sasuke thought that he had been going crazy for a long time. He cursed softly and straightened up. A breath of wind brought the distant cawing of crows. Many crows. Sasuke perked up. His chest began to pound. He realized, where those crows were, his brother was. The Uchiha clenched his fist and stood there for a moment, trying to collect his thoughts and calm the rising excitement. The crows were raging a few kilometers away. His legs were shaking. Time was passing. Finally, Sasuke took a step, then a second, then a third. And a moment later, he realized that he was no longer walking, but running. When he got to the right place, he saw ordinary ravens over the corpse of some animal. Itachi was not there. Hope faded again. The excitement began to subside, and at the same time, the feeling of annoyance increased. Leaving the crows, Uchiha went out to a clearing where a large highway was located and a forest village next to it. It was already evening when Sasuke appeared among the tired residents, who were going home after a hard day. "It's going to rain," someone said from the side. "There's another thunderstorm." The distant rumbles of thunder reached his ear. Sasuke looked away for a moment to look in the direction of the warm wind, and from the other direction came a shuffling sound. An ugly little dwarf with a happy face hobbled past. His crooked back arched like a flea-bitten cat, and his crooked leg bent and straightened with the knee inward. The dwarf raised dust as he shuffled. The brainless, crippled creature probably rejoiced in everything that would surprise a 3-year-old child. A lucky man, even if unhappy. He hardly realized his wretchedness. Sasuke did not know why, but he moved aimlessly after this happily smiling dwarf. The freak brought Uchiha to a dilapidated house, near which 2 already drunk and prematurely aged men were sitting. Hysterical female screams and curses could be heard from the house. One of the drunk men wheezed something and Sasuke glanced at him, but immediately relaxed. The man was not addressing him at all. Lame foot, what is the owner yelling about? The dwarf froze in front of him, staring at the man with a stupid smile. A quiet male voice poured out from the second floor. He's fighting with the guest. The drunk man raised his head. What about the guest? Some kind of fool, the man snorted. He stubbed out his cigarette on the windowsill and disappeared into the darkness beyond the window. Sasuke guessed in front of him was a guest house. He entered and immediately met with an enraged fury hostess. Disheveled hair danced from anger above the head like a flame of fire. Eyes feverishly glittered, and lips were so tightly pressed that it was impossible to see. When her eyes fell on Sasuke, her face lit up with a smile, even lips appeared, outlined by a thin red stripe. Looking for a place to stay? We have a couple of rooms available. What do you prefer? Something without bedbugs. The hostess laughed, covering her mouth with her hand and looking slyly at Uchiha, like an old fox. All our rooms are good. Sasuke stayed. But he couldn't rest here. At first, for the first 3 hours, the house resembled a traveling circus, laughter, guffaws, and vulgar loud conversations. The walls shook, and the bed was damp. And it smelled of mold. He should have taken a room on the second floor, Sasuke thought, but it seemed even noisier there. When it had calmed down a bit, he opened the shoji and leaned his shoulder against the doorway. The moonlight was descending on the earth, the storm clouds had been blown away somewhere to the side, and there was no rain today. This time could be called calm, but Sasuke was again and again overcome by memories, hatred, the desire for revenge and death for his brother, and regret. They had long since disappeared. Sasuke frowned, his head ached. It was hard to breathe. He continued to be thrown around, he continued to be torn to pieces. He understood that if he returned back to reality and did not meet his brother, it would only get worse. Worse for him. He would not be able to continue living peacefully. And at the same time, the opposite thoughts were killing him. He knew that he must not interfere with the past. No matter how absurd the situation was, nothing could be changed. Sasuke must kill Itachi, Itachi must die. Sasuke must lose his way, Itachi must disappear into time. This was already written by them themselves and imprinted in the past. Suddenly a lullaby began to sound. A quiet female voice merged with the silence. She sang soothingly behind the wall. But Sasuke had never heard a child cry or laugh here. Sasuke listened, looking at the full moon, and thought. When Itachi died, he was sure that he would get rid of the pain, dissolve in hatred. But neither pain nor hatred left him then. Itachi will stay here forever, here is the past. Sasuke turned away from the moon, stood up, went out onto the porch, closed the shoji and went down. It was impossible to stay here any longer, and there was no sleep. He lowered his chin, his bangs covered half the street. After taking a few steps, Sasuke turned aside and walked past a couple of houses that had long since fallen asleep. He walked, lost in his thoughts, not noticing anything around him. It seemed that only he and the singing woman in the guest house were awake. Suddenly, a cough was heard from the side. Sasuke intuitively turned and saw someone removing his hand from his face. The Uchiha saw a painfully familiar black cloak with red swirls. My throat tightened. My whole body was pierced at once, my heart started beating faster, as if it was about to burst out. There was little air, but I didn't have the courage to take a breath. Goosebumps ran through me. Itachi was walking towards them. He raised his head and Sasuke met his gaze for a moment. His brother's face did not show a single emotion. But Sasuke tensed up. He also intuitively tried to hide it, although it seemed that Itachi had noticed everything long ago. The first time he met his resurrected brother, 16 years ago, it was something similar. Now it was happening again. Only this time it was even more merciless. Sasuke trembled. And that was it. The strength instantly left the body, and the determination flowed away like sand through the fingers. Everything inside twisted, paralyzing the Uchiha for a couple of seconds. Itachi, no longer looking, walked past in silence. Biting his lip until it hurt to come to his senses, Sasuke refrained from turning around. It would have been too suspicious. His eyes stung. It seemed to clack somewhere under his ear. The dwarf turned out on the other side and quickly hobbled past. Sasuke turned slightly. The creature ran after his brother, clacking again. Itachi stopped, and the dwarf extended an ugly hand, clutching something in it. Itachi took the handed object, as it seemed to Sasuke, and nodded to the freak. The dwarf jumped up, silently grinning, trying to wave his arms. Itachi suddenly disappeared, numerous crows flew to the sides. The dwarf clapped his hands dully, turned sharply and, still with silent laughter, briskly hobbled back. It seemed that he was jumping with pleasure. A pang ached in his soul and wounded hatred arose towards the freak. At the same time, Sasuke became embarrassed. He turned sharply, letting the dwarf pass. Sasuke looked back again. Itachi was gone. His older brother didn't recognize him. Sasuke, as if stunned, hurried to leave this place. He rushed in a completely different direction from Itachi. To search so much, to leave like that. Sasuke was ready to strangle himself. He stopped when he reached the main road. Everything in him resisted even more, the internal contradictions of Satan more and more furiously with each passing minute, tearing both body and soul in half. He tried to talk himself into going to the city now. He had already seen Itachi. Itachi still alive. Just now. And that should be enough. But it was infinitely less. He needed Itachi. His legs wouldn't obey him, his body was aching, and his thoughts kept returning to Itachi, again and again, more and more mercilessly and furiously. His brother's fleeting glance was clearly before his eyes. As if beckoning, as if calling him to follow. Sasuke clenched his teeth. No. Enough. He turned around. Again. The only meaning in this world or the next for him had always been and would always be Itachi. He understood that. And resigned himself. And Sasuke, as before, rushed after his older brother again. No. This time the pursuit was not about revenge. Pursuit, Sasuke said and grinned. This time the pursuit was about something else, and Sasuke was afraid that this something else would become more destructive, would not turn into a bigger mistake than the last one. By midday the clouds had returned. At first they hung overhead for a long time, waiting, then finally it began to rain. The swallows stubbornly continued to fly over the clearing near the village, but after a while they quickly disappeared, and the rain intensified. Sasuke managed to return to the shabby guest house he had left the night before. The owner immediately pounced on him with her flattering greeting. Her cunning eyes lit up, and her mouth, against her will, tried to stretch into an overly satisfied smile. Uchiha guessed what she wanted to get, but pretended not to notice her hints. He was not going to rent a room, but he was in no hurry to tell him about it either. The old fox approached from one side and then from the other, but before she lured the guest and sold him the most expensive room, she had to answer questions about Itachi. The dancing around and around the conversations about his brother and the free rooms quickly bored Uchiha, and he asked where he could find the dwarf. The hostess immediately wiped the smile that was already stretched with difficulty from her face, and her eyes reflected caution. The woman shuddered. Why did you need it? The eyes narrowed involuntarily. The sudden change in the old fox was alarming. He met with the person I needed. The dwarf is dumb and stupid. It seemed like the dancing around and around was starting again. Sasuke frowned and closed his eyes, trying not to say too much. He asked patiently. What is the dwarf transmitting? What is he doing? The mistress began to fuss. With her right hand she tucked a curly, skinny lock of black hair behind her ear and carefully began to tug at the earlobe. Someone behind the wall began to yell at that moment. The mistress was immediately distracted, barked and turned back to Sasuke. Pass it on? She began. I sent him to take medicine to the buyers. Is Itachi your customer? Sasuke asked immediately. The old fox blushed, blinked, and scanned the surface of the table with her eyes, then grabbed a fan with a frayed fringe and began to twirl it in her nervous hands. She hesitated. Does he come often? Uchiha asked again. The hostess pursed her lips and looked frantically into the corner, as if thinking about the answer. Not particularly, like everyone else. He might show up once every 2 weeks, or maybe once a month, she said with already pale lips, put down her fan and asked with trembling animation, So will you rent a room? Can I buy the same medicine? The woman blinked her eyelashes in the silence. Behind the wall, they cackled again, but now no one paid any attention to them. The hostess quietly named the price. Sasuke threw a couple of coins on the table. The old fox quickly counted them, glanced at Sasuke and reached under the table. The woman's eyes were literally searching the new buyer at that moment. The woman extended her hand with a clenched fist. Just don't tell anyone, she said and gave Sasuke a small, thick package, and immediately asked again about the room. Sasuke thought about telling her that he would rent a room for a couple of weeks and she would give him all the information he needed. If she had anything to say about Itachi. It was unlikely that anyone here would know anything about Itachi. Sasuke sighed in relief. No. He left the guest house. The rain had died down and was now falling in heavy, rare drops. Occasionally the sun would peek through, causing the grass and leaves of the trees to sparkle. It was cool, his nose had been itching for a long time. From somewhere off to the side, sounds came. As if a shovel was being driven into the ground and scraping against stones. Sasuke walked along the path and noticed the disturber of the silence. The dwarf was digging a hole with a shovel that was too big for him. Nearby lay a cutting of a tree with roots wrapped in a white bag. Sasuke watched the dwarf sideways, but was in no hurry to approach. The freak smiled idiotically, sometimes jumping up and barking. What could he say about Itachi? It would be possible to wait until his brother returned here. Especially since he came to this house for the medicine packed in a suspicious little package the size of a fingernail. Wait and lose precious time. This idea was quickly and without regret rejected. Instead of waiting, Sasuke went into the forest again. Only by the end of the evening of the next day did he manage to catch the noise of crows far from the village. Sasuke rushed towards the cries and half an hour later he came across a huge black flock of inviting birds. There was no doubt they belonged to Itachi. Sasuke stopped in a clearing where birds had taken to the sky and looked around with bated breath. He tried to calm his own breathing. The forest was silent. Only the crickets were beginning to chirp in the evening. The darkness from behind the old firs and gnarled cedars was creeping closer, forcing him to tense up even more. His muscles were constricted, and he still couldn't get enough air. Sasuke's eyes were tensely moving around, catching the slightest movement. What if Itachi appeared from the shadows? There was a crunch behind him. Sasuke turned around in an instant and managed to notice a dry cedar branch fall into the green moss. He glanced up, but there was no one on the cedar. Silence washed over him again. It was as if the trees themselves had frozen in tension, even the air became prickly and unsafe. Suddenly, Sasuke realized that Itachi was nearby and had been watching for a long time. It felt uneasy. Sasuke remembered, just in case, which side the kunai and shuriken were on. His hand twitched unconsciously, but Uchiha froze, looking around and wondering which side his brother might be on. Shork came from behind. Sasuke closed his eyes for a moment. He was enveloped in darkness, silence, and the cautious rustling that mingled with it, like footsteps. He turned slowly, looked up, and froze. Itachi stood between two trees, as if he had been there from the very beginning, silent, cautious, as protective as his brother. The heart began to beat frantically again. "Who are you?" His brother's voice broke the silence. Sasuke trembled, something closed over them both and left them alone in this forest. His throat tightened. This was the second time they had met in a few days. Itachi looked at him the same way he always did. The same way he would have looked if he had met him 16 years ago. He always played the role of an indifferent person, without emotions, whether it was a brother or a stranger. Sasuke remembered Itachi's partner and listened, maybe he was hiding somewhere nearby. But no one else broke the silence, not even the crickets chirped. Genjutsu, Uchiha realized, and a chill ran through his body. Itachi stood motionless in front of him, not looking away and waiting. Sasuke opened his mouth, but the words came out with great difficulty. "I was looking," he hesitated, "for you." A stupid answer from a stranger to a renegade. There is no village, no settlement, not even a road. Doubly suspicious. Why? The quiet voice again. To talk, Sasuke didn't finish, and the thought flowed away. He wanted to look away, not to see Itachi's indifference, which was diluted with wariness. Sasuke thought that if he met his brother, he would be able to tell him everything, but now he felt an inexplicable loss. He and his brother were separated by an even greater distance than ever, the same as his death. It all seemed like an illusion. The past from deep childhood vaguely flashed before his eyes and disappeared. His brother's touches, his old smile disappeared. He was turning into the one who stood before him now. An exiled apostate and murderer, dying alone, with no one to care about him in the future. About what? Itachi asked after a moment. About the past, his voice trembled treacherously. About Konoha, about you. Sasuke stopped, realizing that he had said too much. Itachi watched silently, without blinking, trying not to lose sight of a single movement. Something ironic was reflected in his face. Have we met before? Sasuke pursed his lips, held his breath for a moment and began to understand. It was impossible to get through to him in such a naive way. If only he could stop the moment and think a little more. The brother turned his head to the side, as if losing interest in his interlocutor. We've met before. Sasuke paused. I'm an Uchiha. Itachi froze and looked at Sasuke with distrust. He was probably expecting an attack. He needed to pull himself together. Sasuke took a deep breath and easily broke out of his brother's illusion. A breeze ran across his face, the smell of pine and moss appeared. A raven's cawing flew over the forest, a cricket chirped, and another one answered it right away. The real world. The relatively real one, the past. The real Itachi, still alive, still breathing, only looking too tired. Sasuke slightly bowed his head, his bangs swayed. Itachi shuddered. He realized that the illusion had been destroyed. In an instant, the brother changed. He tensed up, narrowed his eyes and retreated slightly. Sasuke prepared to defend himself. What's your name? Itachi's voice changed. His tongue could not bring himself to answer. Sasuke stalled again. Itachi made seals, and his figure dissipated, crumbled into shreds that turned into birds. The crow screamed and flapped into the sky and scattered. He had to quickly look around, look up. Itachi was standing on a wide tree branch, looking down, pressing one hand to the gnarled trunk. Would you believe it, Itachi? A breath of wind made the lips part. My name is Sasuke. The voice was as quiet as his brother's. After a moment, Itachi lowered his hand. The silent pause did not last long. I didn't come to fight. A few days ago I got into the past. He stopped, thought for a second about how to say it. Here. Itachi. Sasuke looked straight into his eyes and added, I'm your brother. Itachi was silent for a moment. Then something changed in him. His face darkened. It seemed that his brother was angry. He looked as if he could see right through him, peer into his soul. What do you want? He asked coldly. Sasuke felt the ground disappear from under his feet. Itachi was far away, as if he were dead. Long dead, Sasuke reminded himself. And still as cold. A burning resentment flashed through him. He wanted to curl up in a dark corner and wait a little longer. You will call me in a few months to the Uchiha temple. We will meet there, Sasuke said without knowing why. His brother's eyes flashed, but he remained motionless, continuing to listen. I know everything now, Itachi. What really happened about our clan and village. And I don't blame you. Uchiha blurted out, not realizing his words. Only now did he notice beads of sweat rolling down his back. He suddenly thought that he shouldn't be standing here, shouldn't be saying this. But he was talking, and Itachi was listening. Sasuke bit the inside of his lip, his eyebrows furrowed. It felt like he had turned into his younger brother again. It was too quiet, so quiet that it was deafening. Itachi was silent, and so was the forest. The crows had disappeared somewhere. If that's the case, Itachi suddenly said, and Sasuke looked at him. Why are you following me instead of going back? Sasuke took a step toward his brother, but a raven flew right in front of him with a sharp cawing. He had to freeze. Clearly, Sasuke thought, he won't let him. It's just that in that world, my throat went dry and I had to swallow, where I am now. Are you still an apostate? Sasuke stopped short. No, he paused, looking at Itachi. The same cold mask, tense, distant and alien. And again it pierced his soul. I'm back. It's a long story. Itachi narrowed his eyes. He was still listening. Still in that tree, watching and waiting for an answer or an explanation. I don't know, Sasuke gave in with a sigh and looked away. A short moment passed before his brother spoke. You're wasting your time. His voice seemed to soften. Or did it just seem that way? Sasuke glanced hopefully at his brother. He turned around, but didn't move from his spot, only slightly turning over his shoulder, and after a few seconds decisively said, "Come back." Itachi disappeared into the tree crown. Sasuke let out a sharp breath and couldn't believe his eyes, his brother was leaving. Without thinking for another second, Uchiha rushed after him. As luck would have it, the path was blocked by branches and darkness. Sasuke shouted his brother's name, but he didn't even respond. To leave everything as it was, to let his brother go, to find the technique and return back to his time, to where only loneliness surrounded him, all of this now lost its meaning. At least, this is how Sasuke would later justify himself to himself. To return and leave his brother in the past, to do the same as Itachi always did, to run away, Sasuke did not want and did not intend to. Itachi, he called out again. The brother stopped a few minutes later in a clearing. Sasuke jumped out of the forest and also froze, noticing how he tried to balance his breathing. Sasuke thought that now was the best time to tell him why he was still running after him. You know you don't have long left, he blurted out, and his heart skipped a beat. Sasuke continued, a little calmer. Ever since you died, I wanted to talk. Because I had questions. Always, Itachi. If I'd known things would turn out like this. Itachi didn't turn around. He was breathing more evenly now. And Sasuke felt that he couldn't control his own emotions. He held his breath for a while, clenching his fists and teeth. He swallowed hard. We can talk some more, Itachi. Talking won't change anything, his brother said quietly and turned away. Sasuke blinked rapidly in confusion and surprise. Itachi's gaze changed. There was no coldness or arrogance in it, instead, despair. Go back. This time doesn't belong to you anymore. His voice remained calm, and he looked as if he would never see Sasuke again. Itachi turned his back again, don't follow me, and added even more quietly, please. Everything collapsed at once. His brother was leaving again, silently and quietly. And Sasuke stood there, unable to take another step. His chest ached. The abyss of the night cold was inevitably enveloping him, and loneliness was returning again. Sasuke realized that no matter what happened, Itachi would continue to avoid him. Uchiha lowered his head, staring at the soft green moss on which the dewdrops rested. His soul wavered, his thoughts were confused, his legs hummed and trembled, but he felt something pushing him forward. He could still hear his brother's words, he could still see him. Itachi said, come back, but he didn't want to come back. Itachi asked not to follow him, but Sasuke couldn't fulfill this request. In the past, he had always looked at his brother's back, this time he wanted to change everything. But it would take time. An endless amount of time, of which there was so little left. Sasuke had been following his brother's trail for several days. He had to keep his distance, to remain unnoticed. In order not to rush forward and suddenly reduce the distance to an impermissibly short distance, he stopped, closed his eyes for a second and took a deep breath, calmed down and continued following the trail. Sasuke quietly repeated to himself that he needed to wait a few more days. He was grateful that he was now in his 30s and not 16. Otherwise, he would not have been able to bear it, he would have caught up with his brother and only made things worse. He had to be patient and wait. Of course, his brother hardly believed that all attempts to find a new meeting would be in vain. Sasuke was sure that Itachi knew that he was following him. It couldn't be otherwise. The younger Uchiha frowned. His shoulder had been hurting for quite some time. Dark clouds drifted through the drooping branches of the tall cedars. The thunderclaps had been growing louder and longer over the last half hour, the first storm in a week. The sun had finally hidden itself. A drizzle had begun, and the day had turned black. Sasuke hated changes in the weather, because with them came phantom pain. Like now. He touched his shoulder with his hand, then looked at the footprints his brother and another of the Akatsuki had left in the grass. The footprints would have been washed away in an instant if they hadn't been in the forest. Sasuke stopped briefly under a spreading tree, which showed old but still living roots from the ground, and decided to wait out the rain here. The tracks would not go anywhere, and the Akatsuki had been on the road for too long, so they would most likely make a stop. His brother and his partner had been going around villages and settlements for several days in a row. They did not look for guest houses, but avoided them. They preferred shade, dirt, stealth, and a permanent road, which was only to their advantage. The rain would calm down and then get stronger, continuing until the evening. Sasuke, after a short break, managed to follow the trail a little more until it got completely dark. It was time for another halt. He needed to get some sleep before the new day. It cleared up, the first stars appeared, the crickets began to sing. Sasuke wrapped himself in his cloak, listening to the soft silence. Memories flooded in, growing cloudier with each passing year. It was not always possible to understand where they were, and where were dreams and fantasies, what was true, and what was fiction. Before, he thought that he would never forget anything from his childhood, but now he understood that it does not happen that way. You always forget something. Sasuke had always strived to understand his brother, whether he knew it or not. When he was alone and wandering the forests, he believed he was getting closer to that. But now he was well aware, he was still far from him. They were completely different. Itachi was forced to be cut off from the world, but Sasuke wanted it himself. An owl hooted. Uchiha narrowed his eyes slightly, then closed them and tried to sleep. 3 to 3.5 hours, the Akatsuki don't stay longer than that. They're constantly moving. Darkness and peace quickly enveloped him. The crackling of the fire could be heard. He was already dreaming something. A pleasant warmth spread through his body. The silence of the summer night was broken by the trills of a cricket somewhere above his head, in the leaves of a tree. His brother should be nearby. This was a dream, after all. Sasuke smiled slightly, but did not open his eyes, but he clearly felt a pleasant peace, no need to run anywhere, no need to hate or indulge in sadness and regret. He and Itachi were alone here, no one would disturb them, because no one knew where they were and what they were doing. But was his brother really nearby? He did not want to open his eyes and see emptiness at all. Sasuke, his brother suddenly called out from somewhere in the deep darkness of sleep. His heart felt lighter. Itachi was nearby. Counting to 3 in his head, Sasuke turned his head slightly, but did not open his eyes. What has the new world become? Sasuke shuddered. He involuntarily looked for his brother, but all that was around him was the morning silence and coolness. There was no fire, no brother, no conversation with him, no peace. The sky was already breaking dawn. Sleep inevitably slipped away. The Uchiha stood up and stretched slightly, looking around. How much had passed already? 4 hours? The short dream deceptively stretched out the time until the morning. The road again, trampled grass here and there, broken and bent blades of grass and twigs, disturbed moss, torn cobwebs. Somewhere around midday, for a short moment, the tracks merged with nature, as if his brother had slipped away. Having wandered a bit, Sasuke realized that Itachi was finally alone, separated from his partner. Now it was possible to get close to him again, get him to talk and convince him to spend at least a short time together, like brothers. Like before, in his deepest childhood. Which seemed like something unattainable, an unrealizable dream. But the enthusiasm was fading, giving way to despair. The whole time Uchiha followed his brother. He was thinking about how to approach him and what to say, but nothing came to mind. Sasuke knew, he would be able to talk to his brother if he wanted to. The long-awaited moment had arrived, but there was still no plan. One last try, he couldn't wait any longer. If he failed here, he would have to leave Itachi alone and return to the future, where all that was left of his brother was an unmarked grave. A small tavern stood on the outskirts of a quaint fishing village. It was here that Itachi went after he had parted ways with his partner. The second of the Akatsuki had not even set foot in the village. Sasuke stood near the entrance to the tavern for a moment, then, letting 2 old men leave, he entered himself. He was immediately enveloped by a spicy smell mixed with the aroma of citrus. A cheerful conversation could be heard from one side, and a child's short laughter from the other. Sasuke glanced around, involuntarily feeling like a thief. Small tables were separated by portable paper partitions, torn in some places and glued together more than once. This did not in any way violate the privacy of the visitors. An excellent place for criminals to negotiate or for secret dates. Apparently, no one here cared about others. People were busy with themselves, they weren't guessing, they weren't trying to see who was sitting next to them, a criminal wanted by the entire shinobi world or a person from the future who shouldn't have been here. The gaze fell on a man in a black cloak. Brother. Sasuke walked past a couple of tables and sat in the corner, watching Itachi. Only his back was visible. A paper partition covered his face and hands. The short-legged but nimble waitress slid behind the partition with the dish, and a moment later she was already standing next to Sasuke, ready to take his order. "Tea," said Uchiha and immediately gave him a few coins. A steaming mug of green tea quickly landed on the table. The waitress disappeared, and Sasuke waited a few minutes and stood up, full of determination. His heart was pounding like crazy. He even felt hot. A conversation was waiting ahead, which would determine whether the Uchiha brothers would see each other for the last time or not. Sasuke quickly crossed the room and silently sat down opposite Itachi. His brother looked up in surprise. His fingers were touching a tall mug, which already had half the green tea left. A shallow bowl with a dinner of rice with greens stood to the side, almost untouched. Sasuke ran his gaze across the table, then over his brother's hands, and finally stopped at his eyes. "It's wiser not to interfere with the past," Itachi said dully after a short pause. He was tense, too. "I'm not leaving until we talk. You can run away again. And I'll find you. And the hell with it, how many times can this happen again?" Sasuke finished. It was difficult to contain my emotions. Itachi looked down. His fingers trembled slightly. The light from the lantern was reflected and frozen in the ring. "You knew I would follow you. Did you split up with your partner on purpose?" Sasuke looked around unnoticed, wondering if Itachi had used a technique. He had to be ready. Even for a fight. But his brother didn't attack, sat motionless, and didn't even resort to illusions. Someone's child laughed again, and the adults joined in. Drunken string music began to play. At that moment, it seemed as if the silence between the brothers was only growing. Sasuke's words had disappeared. His heart was still pounding, his stomach was twisting with excitement. He didn't know what his brother was thinking, or if he was ready to listen. Long ago, Itachi had always said something, tried to instill or revive self-hatred. Now he was simply silent, and it became even more awkward. "I dream that we are sitting like this and keeping silent," Sasuke finally said. Itachi didn't move. Only his fingers trembled slightly again, tracing the ceramic of the mug. No effort was needed to persuade, no fight, his brother was in front of him, listening and not interrupting. Sasuke continued. "I often dream that we can't find the words, although we have something to say to each other." He frowned. It came out somehow pathetic, like an excuse. Sasuke looked at Itachi and shuddered. Memories of a recent dream flooded in. Then he saw pain and resentment in his brother's eyes. Now reality was no different from a dream. Sasuke felt like he was suffocating, and no matter how hard he tried to breathe, he couldn't get enough air. Thoughts were tearing his head apart, his mouth was dry. Itachi was sitting opposite him. It seemed that he already knew everything, and now he didn't want to waste his energy on explanations. But Sasuke himself really needed them. He still couldn't pull himself together. He clenched his teeth and tried to order his heart to calm down. He was being torn to pieces, but it wasn't anger, or loss, or fear, or the past or the future. Something else. Sasuke looked at Itachi as if he were a person he didn't know. What was going on in the soul of such a person? Was it empty or was there deep sadness? Itachi was silent, as usual, locking everything inside. Sasuke couldn't get through. Just like then, after the defiling Edo Tensei, Itachi said that he couldn't get through to his younger brother, Sasuke couldn't get through to Itachi. His brother had long since closed the door behind him and left. Down a dark road. And he never returned. This made it more offensive and sad. Sasuke didn't know where to put himself, what to do, didn't know where to look, but his own silence caused even more horror. It would have been easier if Itachi, as usual, had said something to him, and Sasuke had listened. It was always easier that way. But Itachi remained silent. Impenetrable shadow, no way to get to him. You've become sentimental, a voice suddenly said. Sasuke was surprised. It was either his brother's calm voice and patronizing manner, or his outward calm that made him drop the tension. Itachi wanted to speak? Extended his hand? A spark of hope lit up inside. Maybe because, Sasuke began cautiously and apprehensively, there is no threat of war in the future, Naruto managed. We all. He paused, calming down. He smiled slightly, albeit nervously, or maybe because I'm 32. Itachi glanced at his brother. Sasuke fell silent, gave him some time to think. Then he added quietly. It's funny, my older brother is 11 years younger than me. You're in the past, that's what's funny, there's not a single happy note in his voice. Tension again. Itachi remained cold and internally dissatisfied. But at least he was still sitting opposite and hadn't left yet. Sasuke thought for a second and looked away. Then, as quietly and calmly as he could, he said. I know the name of the person who owns the forbidden technique. It won't be hard for me to make him help. But instead of going to him, I wanted to meet you. You know, the future where I am has long since lost its colors. I'm not whining to you, Itachi. I just want you to understand why it's not so important to go back right now. Sasuke involuntarily clenched his fingers. Itachi watched carefully and seemed to be studying. And he was still sitting opposite. I'll leave, Sasuke said, later. They looked into each other's eyes for a while. Itachi gave in first, looked away. Sasuke understood, he got what he wanted. His brother was ready to give in. They sat in the guest house, Sasuke ordered dinner. They both ate, but hardly spoke, there was nothing to talk about. They were strangers to each other. They needed to get to know each other again. Build new bridges. Sasuke was in no hurry to ask his brother about his life. It seemed that the time was not right, and it would be reckless to immediately pounce on Itachi with questions. Patience and time, Sasuke reminded himself. He slowly told about his life, their penultimate meeting 16 years ago, about the meeting itself and the fight, about the fact that he finally learned the truth. He only didn't say from whom, Itachi didn't ask. Sasuke didn't notice how the tension almost completely disappeared. It was replaced by excitement and a small, imperceptible tremor. But it was still difficult to enjoy the conversation with his older brother, even though he was mostly silent. They decided to spend the night in the barn. They didn't have to rent a room, and the walls were thin, there was no need for anyone to listen to their conversation. Sasuke settled down near the wall opposite his brother, Itachi, by the open gate. Night fell, but it was light enough to catch each other's emotions. Sasuke said that after he lost his main goal in life, for which he trained and left the village, he was ready to stop. You died, and I learned the truth. I didn't want to continue. I used to think that I would restore the clan, he smiled sadly, looking somewhere into the darkness. The boy's goal collapsed, because he spent all his energy and strength on the first one. Sasuke noticed that Itachi was looking at him, as if furtively admiring or wanting to figure something out. He raised his head. Like you. Itachi recoiled slightly in silent surprise. I know what you wanted. That is what the third and the elders thought, Sasuke chuckled, that the Uchihas are cursed. To achieve their desires, they need to overcome a lot. Itachi forced out a meager half-smile and turned away. He peered into the sky. The moving clouds revealed a silver moon. Itachi's face lit up slightly. What about Danzo? He asked without turning around. Dead. He got what he deserved, Sasuke frowned and thought. The fact that we met here will influence the future, the brother distracted. Why? I didn't interfere in anything. Itachi shook his head slightly. Don't get stuck here, he said. You won't get out if you stay here long. How do you know? It's obvious. Just think about the technique. Such things definitely have consequences. So, excitement rose in my chest again. Itachi didn't let him finish. No, Sasuke. It's to change the past, that's her plan. Why does she throw you here? Have you ever wondered why you were thrown here? Sasuke thought about it. Itachi continued. Whoever used it most likely knew what you would do, interfere with the past, and the future would inevitably change. Now that you know the truth, is it really that hard to leave things as they are? He looked at Sasuke defiantly. The ground slipped out from under his feet. Suddenly his whole body began to prickle. Indeed, there was a desire to interfere with the past, but he himself understood that this was fraught with consequences. You can't, Sasuke repeated to himself. Otherwise, everything will collapse. I understand everything, Itachi. I'm not 16. Itachi turned away. Sasuke managed to catch the emotions on his face, but did not understand them. He leaned slightly. Then he smiled and leaned against the wooden wall again. Yes. Here you are. You came back after all, he said, and then explained good-naturedly and easily. You made a smart speech. Promise me you won't interfere. Sasuke looked at his brother's silhouette, framed by the moonlight. His white skin. His calm. He was there, but it was as if he was disappearing. Again, unpleasant sensations, something incomprehensible pulled him down, into the depths, into the abyss. As if you promise not to interfere now, you will give up on a happy world. It is wise to let what is meant to happen happen. Itachi was on this side. Sasuke didn't know which side he was on. It took a lot of strength to let what was going to happen and to remain in the loneliness that hovered around his brother. Sasuke was drowning in the pool, looking at it, knowing the future. Sasuke, his brother suddenly reminded him of himself. The silence dragged on. Promise. I promise. His voice trembled, and his chest hurt. There was silence for a while. Itachi, Sasuke said quietly, we'll spend time together until... He didn't finish what he wanted to say. Like brothers. Real ones. The Uchiha brothers? Itachi bowed his head slightly, but did not turn around. Sasuke chuckled. Actually, tears had been welling up in his eyes for a long time. Yes. Itachi was sleeping. If it could be called sleeping. More like dozing. Quietly and not peacefully. Sasuke silently watched him, not moving, since any rustle would wake his brother up. That night Sasuke thought about what would have happened if he had interfered with the past. Perhaps he would never have learned the truth and lived with a sense of revenge until the end. And what would Itachi have done with his illness if he had survived? A silver beam slid across the plank floor once again, illuminating the nearest dark corners of the barn. A cricket began to chirp, and others responded. Sometimes they would quiet down, and the brother would wake up. He would listen. Out of habit. I wonder, Sasuke thought, has he ever slept peacefully? The Eternal Road, enemies, hunters of apostates. There is no hiding from them, and the crickets that have died down could only indicate that someone is approaching. Eternal tension. Even Uchiha Itachi must be wary and constantly look back. Sasuke turned his gaze from his silent brother to the barely visible path, diving under the tall grass. It twisted and led into the distance, across the meadow. It separated the abandoned barn where the Uchihas were located from the last residential building. An elderly couple in identical straw hats had been seen there that evening. Typical peasants. They looked like the neighbors who lived in their own clan across the road, an always smiling granny and a strict old man. Uchihas. Were they really ready to follow Fugaku? Sasuke blinked away his father's heavy gaze, glanced at his brother and shuddered. Itachi was sitting by the same wall, looking straight at Sasuke. When had he managed to wake up? It's time to go, he said. They left the village before dawn. They walked along a winding path through a meadow, past the edge of the village, and disappeared into the forest. They didn't feel like sleeping. Itachi kept listening and turning around. He walked silently, not like a shinobi, but like an animal. That was right, they had been taught to move like that since childhood, but they still needed to train properly. His brother would have taken first place. Sasuke didn't ask where he was going. He just followed him. No one was pursuing the Uchiha, but they were leaving. It was necessary. If you stop, they will find you. If they find you, they will attack and try to kill you. Eternal movement. Eternal road. They stood in front of a wide, quiet river. Silently they watched the shimmering iridescence on its surface and the small, barely noticeable fish sliding along the bottom of the river. The warm breeze made the leaves in the green crowns whisper, the sun warmed their skin. The brothers had been together for 3 days already. Today Itachi was supposed to meet his partner to continue the mission from the organization. He didn't want to let him go, but Sasuke was powerless to do anything about it. How long will the task take? He asked. A bright butterfly appeared before his eyes. It flew to the other side of the river and disappeared behind a bush. The younger Uchiha unconsciously waited for it to fly up again, but the insect did not appear. I think about a month. Only yesterday evening, his brother suddenly said that it was time for him to leave. Sasuke wanted to object, but Itachi hinted at his promise not to interfere with the past. He had to remain silent. And today they stood and tried to enjoy their last minutes together. As if that was the plan. But instead of enjoying themselves, both were enveloped in loneliness. And each kept silent about it. Sasuke was still waiting for the butterfly to appear, unconsciously making it a symbol of hope. He listened to the chirping of birds and the singing of cicadas. The sun was baking his skin, but it wasn't warming him at all. A voice was constantly whining in his ear, "You'll wake up soon." He had to push it away, but it would come back and scream even louder. Sasuke glanced anxiously at his brother and realized that he had never touched him, even in passing. Even now he stood a few meters away from him, as if he was afraid to violate the distance. The damned Uchiha pride prevented him from taking a step closer. Nature continued to selfishly rustle its greenery. Birds and cicadas did not pay attention to the two dark and silent figures on the shore. Finally Itachi said, "It's time." "Yes," Sasuke replied. He narrowed his eyes. A fish splashed. Everything went quiet again. "Everyone has their own mission," Itachi began. "I didn't want to hear anything about inevitability and obligation." Sasuke narrowed his eyes and calmly asked, "Where can I find you in a month?" Itachi was silent for a moment, then said, "I think this is the last meeting." "No," Sasuke snapped and looked sternly at his brother. He only closed his eyes and slightly pursed his lips. It was as if he was waiting for his younger brother to leave him, for them to finally part. "I'll find the equipment and come back to you." "You don't have time." "I have plenty of it," Sasuke objected, waved his hand irritably and managed to pull himself up. He should shake Itachi, make him understand that they couldn't part so easily. Without spending a little more time together. That his younger brother wouldn't leave, leaving everything as it was. As selfish as it may sound, Sasuke admitted deep down to himself that he needed the company of his newly acquired brother, a real brother. Everything inside him was turning over like a hurricane. Sasuke could barely cope with the unruly wave of emotions. He had to meet Itachi again. And never let him go again. "I'll find the owner and come back. I'll stay here as long as possible. As soon as everything starts to fall apart, I promise I'll leave." He looked at Itachi, around whom everything had gone dark. The noise of leaves and birds disappeared for a moment. There was only his brother. And a butterfly. The unexpected appearance of this insect awakened the certainty that this conversation could not be the last. Itachi gave up again. "Totem Rock, there is a lake under it. I will come there at dawn, on the 17th. "I will," Sasuke said immediately. "Definitely." They parted. Once again. Sasuke left his brother, but not for long. For a month. During this time, he promised that he would find the technique and return to him. He will definitely return. He found his brother and now he did not want to lose him. He walked along an untrodden path, finally feeling the warmth of the sun and the scent of flowers. And in front of him, a butterfly was fluttering from flower to flower. The same one. And it gave Sasuke inner confidence and strength. He wanted to be close to his brother. And he already knew in advance that he would be close to him until the end of his life. But this would inevitably lead to changes in the future and would definitely destroy something. Towards evening, Sasuke felt nausea and weakness creeping up on him. Uchiha didn't notice it until the very end, but the attack came so suddenly that his vision went dark. He had to lean against the nearest tree. Tears lit up under his eyelids. The pounding in his head and the internal churning prevented him from breathing normally. The only thing missing was a fever to make him collapse without strength. However, there was none, and Sasuke understood perfectly well what was happening to him. It was far from being sick. Having come to his senses, he looked at the road. It silently wriggled and sarcastically reminded him of what was to come, a scroll with a precious technique, the inevitable death of his brother, and a return to loneliness, opening its arms from the future. If you don't interfere with the course of events, everything will be exactly as the brain has just constructed. As it should be. What if we take Itachi with us? After all, he could have tried to save his brother. Then why did he need to meet him at all? Perhaps, Uchiha thought, the future was already uncertain. Who knew what an innocent meeting with Itachi would lead to? Uchiha held his breath for a moment, calming his thoughts. Then he took a deep, insistent breath, straightened up, and moved again. Step. Another. One more. Sasuke was getting further and further away from his brother, closer to the city. Closer to returning home. His brother had asked him not to interfere. The owner of the forbidden technique turned out to be an old man with a persecution complex, who resembled a long, withered pole. Sasuke had to try hard not to torture him. However, he did not touch the old man with a finger. It was possible to prove quickly that he had fallen under the influence of the forbidden technique and just as quickly get the necessary technique into his hands. The old man kept looking around nervously, as if he was afraid of finding someone else in the room. He kept glancing at the only window, although it was covered with thick curtains. The sun had probably been trying in vain to get through to this house for more than one day. The owner of the technique, for the sake of his own peace of mind, handed over the scroll and dreamed of quickly sending the guest away, but he shuddered when Sasuke suddenly asked. Is it possible to move into the future several years ahead, not 16, for example, but 30? The old man's pale, wrinkled lips began to tremble. Theoretically, yes. The quiet voice still managed to cut through the dusty air of the room. Sasuke narrowed his eyes, and the owner of the house suddenly shuddered, began breathing rapidly and chattering. The theory was also the one that returns to the past. He glanced into the next room, turned around, and it turned out to be effective, the old man said, almost pointing his finger at the guest, so, yes. Yes, you can. The owner of the technique did not linger his gaze on Sasuke, his eyes constantly darted around the room. The man suddenly perked up, as if he remembered something important, and dove into the next room. Paper rustled. He returned with a new scroll, stopped in the doorway and pressed it to himself with trembling hands. He nervously licked his lips and looked around the room again. He's afraid, Sasuke thought and secretly hoped that the old man wasn't deceiving him. I have another request, Uchiha said carefully, lifting the scroll he had in his hand. We need to go back to the past more than once. Return more than once. When Sasuke heard these words from himself, a chill ran through his body. When did he suddenly decide that it was necessary to return to the past once more? And then again and again. He left this question unanswered. That evening, Sasuke disappeared into the forest again. Like Itachi, he did not look for a comfortable place to spend the night, and he did not want to spend money on it. Having settled down in the forest near the young trees, Sasuke could not sleep. The space around him gradually began to squeeze, thoughts of his brother obsessively crept into his head. The shadows stretched out bony hands and burned the soul with their earthy cold. An imaginary shiver ran through his body. Sasuke opened his eyes, each time preparing to see someone's attentive gaze in front of him, but instead there were smooth tree trunks, solid and identical. A cricket was buzzing nearby. For several days now, the same thoughts had been pounding my head, and my body was feeling weak. It's enough to drive you crazy. Sasuke gripped the edge of his cloak with his fingers and held his breath, then looked up at the sky. Stars dotted the sky. Silent, distant stars. The silence intertwined with his own weakness. Uncertainty about what he was doing nipped at his legs, touched them with the pads of his fingers. In the shadows, there behind the trees and bushes, in the grass, in the ground, something was hiding, ready to crawl inside Sasuke. Associations with worms, black and swarming, ready to settle under the white skin and itch. Nausea again, a gnawing sensation in the pit of his stomach. Such a disgusting feeling made him involuntarily shudder. Sasuke ran his hand through his hair, pulling it back, his bangs disobediently standing in place. He rubbed his neck and looked around. The same smooth tree trunks, white against the dark background of the forest. And somewhere behind them, his brother. Among the darkness, among the worms that asked to get under the skin. Uchiha exhaled loudly. This is what lack of sleep and nerves lead to. To delirium in the head. He closed his eyes and tried to stop his thoughts, but it didn't last long. His head was filled with thoughts again and again. Questions appeared. What if we take Itachi with us? Interfere with the past? Step on the future? He looked around, afraid that someone would hear his thoughts. As if Naruto or Kakashi or Sakura were standing behind him. Or Itachi. But all that was around him were the same tree trunks. Sasuke was alone. And no one would hear his thoughts. He bent his leg at the knee and leaned his elbow on it. His brain strained, as if his head was tightly bandaged. So what happens if you take it away? A vision of ruined Konoha flashed before his eyes, people with crippled legs and arms, with skinned faces. Echoing groans and dull alien despair. And also a sense of inevitability. Just like that night when he was a child returning home, and he was met by silent, empty streets. Not a single spirit of presence, as if the northern winter had flared up in the middle of summer. Sasuke touched the bark with the back of his head and began to peer at the stars, then took 2 scrolls from under his cloak, one returning to the future, the other to the past. Light and at the same time heavy from the realization of what they were capable of. A wave of nausea and weakness came over me. Again. What's done can't be undone. He'd heard that somewhere before. Sasuke frowned. He had promised that he wouldn't interfere. He had promised his brother. True, Itachi might not believe that promise. And to be honest, Sasuke himself wasn't sure about his promise. He pressed his hand to his forehead and tried to recall his own past again. To recall the night when the clan was slaughtered. Fear and blood, and in the midst of this chaos a dark figure, not someone else's, but his brother's. He tried to remember the hatred with which he got to Itachi, how he trembled, how his heart was torn from his chest and how everything inside boiled when there was just a little bit left to the goal. He hated his brother. He wanted to feel his blood on his hands. He really wanted it. But where was even a drop of hostility now? Sasuke clenched his teeth and became even quieter, pressed himself against the tree trunk again and thought feverishly. How did it happen that the hatred evaporated, leaving no trace, and the desire for his brother to be near grew like something uncontrollable? Uchiha flinched when a small frog suddenly jumped out from under his foot. He snorted, hid the scrolls under his cloak and stood up. There was no sleep today, just like there was none yesterday, and the day before yesterday. Today there were only thoughts, just like the last 2 weeks. All the same. Just like the next couple of weeks there would be the same thoughts. Until the meeting with Itachi. The days dragged on, Sasuke kept himself in sight, didn't hide. Only once did he hide in a guest house in another city to get himself in order. He sat there without leaving for about a week. He spent this time to finally cover his tracks and think everything through. His clone left him in the first days. Sasuke himself left on the 8th day under the guise of another person. If Itachi was watching his brother, then he should have gone after the clone, and not known what the real Sasuke was doing at that time. The itching under the skin was already starting to drive me crazy. Thoughts flowed over the edge, and Sasuke managed to choke on them. Trying to appeal to conscience, justice, and especially common sense, Sasuke tried to understand whether what he was about to do was justified, whether it was worth risking the well-being of the future for the sake of his own whim. Uncertainty tore me to pieces. I'm going crazy, Uchiha told himself. Just like when he was chasing his brother to rip his throat out. Now he was chasing him to win him from death. Kakashi would say, the right decision. The right decision, Sasuke chuckled. If Itachi had made the right decision, none of this would have happened. If it weren't for the clan, none of this would have happened. If it weren't for Konoha's suspicions, none of this would have happened. Tears were coming to his eyes. His head was aching. Sasuke touched his forehead. He no longer hated his brother, but he hated the village council, the elders, the third's words about his brother, the speeches about the right decisions. And anger was filling him again, his face was burning. The resentment didn't go away, it just died down, and now it felt like it could break through the shell and come out. When the last day was drawing to a close, Uchiha was already at the place where he and his brother had agreed to meet. It was still dark. The totem rock leaned against the sky like a stone, and the lake was smooth and too quiet. Sasuke had come here at midnight and now stood at the narrow bank, waiting and looking, as it seemed to him, almost into the depths, which seemed to be pulling his soul to the bottom. Anxiously. Although it was quiet and calm, the whole world remained far from this patch of land. Very soon the silence was broken, first by a distant rustling sound, then by cautious but not hidden steps. Sasuke closed his eyes calmly. He guessed that his brother was approaching. When everything behind him became quiet, Sasuke turned and glanced briefly at Itachi. Something inside him broke. He looked terribly tired. It seemed that he nodded slightly. "Rough night?" Sasuke asked as gently as he could. Itachi smiled, or pretended to smile, slightly. Something had changed in him. Something was wrong. His gaze slipped away and he walked past Sasuke. The younger followed him in confusion and, without thinking twice, followed him. They walked a few meters from the lake, and Itachi finally said, "I never thought I'd see you as an adult." Itachi didn't turn around, but went around a fallen, half-rotted snag and turned right. Then he stood up, as if wondering where to step. He turned around and looked straight into the eyes of the younger one. "Sasuke," his voice changed. Sasuke held his breath. Anything could be expected from Itachi. Especially now. He was silent and his gaze slowly slid over his face, then a little lower down his shoulders. Sasuke did not fail to notice this. The question immediately spun in his head, why were they here? And what did his brother want to say? Finally, Itachi returned to his brother's eyes. He slightly opened his lips and quietly said, "Sorry." Everything, the trees, Itachi himself, the sky, even the air shook slightly, and the next moment Sasuke saw how his real brother, not an illusory one, had just finished using some technique. The younger Uchiha rushed towards him. And his brother separated his hands, having already completed the seal. The technique was activated. Sasuke didn't have time to do anything. Itachi had deceived, and Sasuke hadn't predicted it. He tried to be careful, but he didn't even suspect that his brother would decide to do everything himself, and right now. It was too late to regret it. Everything went black before my eyes. Sasuke grabbed the air, his leg twisted and he slammed his palm into a tree that suddenly appeared instead of Itachi. He hissed, looking around for his brother. But he was nowhere to be found. And everything around him had changed. Uchiha looked over the trees and his heart skipped a beat. It was much brighter than a second ago. Or 16 years ago? Uchiha turned around and called his brother. But no one responded. Sasuke felt emptiness with all his skin. And when he looked around from the top of a tall tree, he was finally convinced that he was in his own time. It was as if he had woken up from a dream. His brother had just been there, and now he was gone. He hadn't believed that his younger brother would leave the past so easily and had played it safe. Uchiha pursed his lips and looked at the brightening horizon. The sun's rays were just beginning to show. His eyes stung. Sasuke turned away and went down. The clean air stung his lungs. The air is wrong. Itachi is not here. Something heavy stirred in his soul. Is it really an insult? Sasuke thought. With the back of his hand, he touched first one eye, then the other. He stood still for a while. Sasuke was finally able to normalize his breathing. He removed his hand from his face and moved towards the village. But he didn't even go into Konoha. He immediately began tracking Orochimaru. And he tracked him down quite quickly. As if he knew where he would be. Sasuke was ready to do anything to make the Sannin do what he had planned. Won't you regret it? Was the only question the former teacher asked. And to which Sasuke gave no answer, neither to him nor even to himself. He left the Sannin even more thoughtful. A world without a brother, or the same world but with a brother. Before, Sasuke could find even the most insignificant reason to justify his actions. Now he could not name a single one. The world without his brother was not the one he would have lived in. He was finally convinced of this after returning, but he could not justify himself, at least for now. The only thing he repeated to himself was, Itachi was turned into a dog and did not deserve it. A day later, he came to Sakura. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. The girl tried not to show how surprised she was. She greeted Sasuke with a modest smile and a soft look. She was probably still offended by the words thrown at her a couple of years ago during their last quarrel concerning Itachi. Sasuke then said that he should leave Konoha in memory of his brother, and Sakura accused him of being fixated. And no matter how hard the girl in love tried to convince Sasuke that he would not bring his brother back, that repentance cannot last a lifetime, she could not bring the Uchiha to his senses, and she gave in. Even Naruto, with his innate ability to persuade, could not convince Sasuke. The Uchiha did not want to part with the past. Can I ask you for help? Sasuke did not waste time on preliminary conversations with the girl. He knew himself well. Communication with acquaintances depressed him as much as they were beaten by awkwardness next to him. Seeing the surprise on Haruno's face, Sasuke looked away and took out a small bag he had bought from the old fox. We need to prevent cardiac arrest, he said sparingly and handed over the medicine. Sakura took the bag. A task, yes? Yes. Will you mix it with this? He nodded towards the medicine. Okay. It won't take long, she said. Sasuke nodded and sighed in relief. Sasuke, she looked down a little, I haven't seen you for a long time. Uchiha didn't answer. He knew where the conversation would lead and looked impatiently towards the Konoha gates. And Sakura continued. You know, we're all waiting for you and... I can't. You know, Sasuke interrupted dryly. Sakura blinked. Her cheeks turned slightly pink. The same thing every time they met. Even after a couple of years apart. Sakura apparently didn't want to give up and didn't understand that he couldn't return to Konoha after everything that had happened. He couldn't start living like everyone else, because he didn't deserve it, because he didn't know how to live like everyone else. Sasuke, it's been a long time, Sakura began. Naruto and I miss each other. Maybe it's time to go back? Sasuke looked straight at Sakura. His eyes narrowed involuntarily, and he pursed his lips so that unnecessary words would not escape. He knows very well that nothing connects him with the village. Enough, Sasuke said coldly. Sakura fell silent. She smiled strangely and Uchiha felt that he had offended her. But he said nothing. Sakura lightly hit her thigh with the fist in which the package he had given her was clenched, awkwardly rolled from her heels to her toes and finally said. I'll do it now. Are you in a hurry? Her voice wavered, but Sasuke chose to pretend he didn't notice. Since when had she become so touchy? Or was it just his intonation that wasn't the most welcoming? Yes, please, he said as gently as possible, looking away. When he took the bag from Sakura's hands, he only thanked her and said goodbye. He said nothing about her reddened eyes, compensated by a forced smile and endless politeness. Everything was right, they were two strangers to each other now, although she was still drowning in her feelings for him. Sasuke left the girl and left the village. For the umpteenth time. Away from them all. As far as possible. Uchiha reached the totem rock. Out of breath and almost falling off his feet. Turning to the right, he walked a couple more kilometers and found himself in front of a tree with an unnaturally curved trunk, the roots of which were wrapped around the rocky soil. He looked around and when he was sure there was no one nearby, he dropped to his knees. He began to dig up the compacted earth under the tree with a kunai, cutting the roots with difficulty and digging up small but sharp stones. Finally, he reached the case, dropped the kunai and pulled it out. Sasuke sat up with bated breath and caught his breath. Then he opened the case and the scroll hidden in it seemed almost glowing. Sasuke already felt with his whole body how he would return and see Itachi again. He unrolled the scroll and even stopped breathing. And suddenly he twisted it again and squeezed it. The resentment was coming out. Itachi did everything for Sasuke. Sasuke wanted to do everything for his brother, even step over the well-being of the world. Sasuke has no ties to Konoha. He also died with the clan, they killed him. They only have themselves to blame. Now it was necessary to decide to go back. The conversation with Sakura, Orochimaru's unanswered question, the well-being of the world, everything was buzzing around his head like an annoying fly. Sasuke stood up. He wanted to turn around and look at Konoha, but behind him were kilometers of forest. The village where he was born, where he and his brother grew up, where he lost everything, where there were a few friends who suddenly became just acquaintances, could disappear. And all because Sasuke decided to interfere with the past. I won't regret it? Sasuke realized that he was walking on a road and could not see anything ahead. He tried to remember the voice of his mother, who often calmed him down, the voice of his father, who gave him strength, his brother. A sunny day popped into his head, a clearing where Itachi often trained. They were alone, chatting. It was hot and sleepy. Calm and serene. Green leaves and butterflies. Butterflies everywhere. Uchiha dropped to one knee and opened the scroll. He laid it on the ground and activated it. There is war here. A cool breeze blew in his face, his head began to spin and he had to lower it. Sasuke concentrated his attention on a few blades of grass on which transparent drops had collected. The noise in his ears quickly passed, and the world stopped rocking. Uchiha carefully rose, listening to his inner feeling. If his brother had to endure something like this, it could worsen his condition. One way or another, the main thing was to prevent biological death. Itachi would be weak, and any impact could cause harm. Probably. All that would remain was to get to Orochimaru in time. Without wasting time, Sasuke found himself on the top of a tree and looked around. Silence surrounded him, humidity in the air, crickets and night birds. There was not a single person nearby. Everything as he wanted to see. From this note, the movement according to his own plan began. Uchiha headed towards the already familiar old fox, the woman who supplied his brother with drugs. In the past, Sasuke believed that he was on the right path, that the decisions he made were the only right ones. Then he thought that any other path would lead to nowhere. Always at the mercy of his emotions and impulsiveness. He stumbled a lot. Now everything was repeating itself. Emotions took over. But now Sasuke thought over every step, every possible turn. Over and over again, he replayed everything he had to do. He had made a plan even before meeting Orochimaru, right after his brother brought him back. From morning to night, he thought over and over again, looking for weak points and ways to get around them. Uchiha met the old fox again. The woman was in her guest house, as usual and out of habit, scolding someone. It was already a clear day, and she did not expect to meet such a guest. The fox even turned pale when she saw Sasuke, immediately put the dwarf in front of her, and went behind the table, creating an imaginary barrier. "What do you want?" she asked warily, moving even further away. The guest ignored the smiling freak, extended his hand, and the woman, distrustfully but curiously, fixed her eyes on the bag of medicine that he had bought from her earlier. "We don't accept returns of goods," she began, nervously looking from the bag to the Uchiha and back. "You'll sell it," Sasuke said. Her eyebrows rose and her lips puckered. "Uchiha Itachi," the guest added. "So that an angry client would then come to me with a complaint." She waved her hands and froze again. "He won't come to you anymore," Sasuke threw the bag under her nose. Don't get it wrong. No matter how tense the woman was, she was still pleased with the opportunity to resell the medicine. Itachi was not a valuable client, and Sasuke seemed more dangerous. She did not even inquire what she had to sell. If such luck fell every day and they did not want to kill a woman for such a thing, she would have long ago scraped together a new guest house, which she dreamed of, somewhere by the seashore. She did not ask unnecessary questions, took the medicine and, when Uchiha left her, breathed a sigh of relief. Uchiha used the remaining time to find a suitable replacement body. Orochimaru said that the body should match his build, height to weight. The rest had to be done by himself. In words, it all seemed simple: find someone who looked like his brother, take his body and work on it a little. In reality, it was more difficult. Each time, something was wrong, something did not fit. Sasuke searched. He wandered into the most remote settlements, went into closed villages, made his way into camps and searched. He began searching as far as possible from the shelter where Zetsu would later bring his brother's body, and moved in its direction. But by the end of the second week, he still could not find someone who would fit. The body still needed work, and this also took time. Sasuke lost his peace and was not distracted even by sleep. Uchiha made his way along the river. For a moment, he lost his caution and vigilance. He forgot that there could be someone from Kakashi's team in the area where he was. His head was filled with searching for the body and thinking about the plan. Without the body, there was no plan, and Itachi would not be taken. Without a plan, the future would be disrupted. Sasuke had not yet thought about Edo Tensei. Problems must be solved as they arise, even if you create these problems for yourself. Sasuke once again played out possible turns in his head, not noticing anything around him. Suddenly, a branch cracked under his foot. This made Uchiha remember the outside world and he froze. The hem of his cloak swayed, and then deafening silence followed. Sasuke turned his head and listened. Someone was making his way through the forest in his direction. Quietly, but clearly audible. A question flashed through his head: how long had they been following him like this? Any of Kakashi's dogs could track him down. Sasuke turned around abruptly and stepped back. He scanned the trees, trying to see from which direction the footsteps were coming. Then he darted up, disappeared high up in the tree, among the foliage, practically blended into the bark, and hid. A bird flew up nearby with a scream and quickly disappeared. Its scream stopped. There was a rustling sound below. Sasuke had broken away, he was being pursued. You could practically feel it with your back. Uchiha tried to hide. At first he tried not to make any noise, but he realized that they would chase him even if he became incorporeal. He turned sharply and created clones that ran to the sides and quickly evaporated. This did not help distract the pursuer. Sasuke realized that the one who had attacked him was too fast. He had to change tactics. He hid in a rock crevice and froze, ready for the necessary defense. A sharp stone dug into the skin of his hand, but Sasuke no longer moved. The overgrown clearing in front of the shelter was well lit by the sun, and Uchiha could somehow watch how the tall grass, untouched by him, calmly swayed, as if no one had ever run here. He held his breath so that the pursuer would not even sense him. A breeze came up, the sun disappeared for a moment, and a second later Itachi appeared in the clearing. Sasuke inhaled intermittently and pressed the back of his hand to the cubes. The brother walked across the clearing, looking around unnoticed. It was obvious that he was breathing heavily. "Sasuke," the brother said warily and uncertainly. "How could I have let my attention drop so much?" Sasuke thought and tensed up even more. If Itachi realized that his little brother was here again, everything would collapse. The sharp stone dug into his skin even harder. The younger Uchiha pursed his lips. A bead of sweat trickled down his neck and Itachi turned right in his direction. The world slipped out from under his feet. A shadow ran across the clearing again, the grass and branches swayed slightly. His brother looked away. "Who were you chasing after, Itachi-san?" His partner's voice was heard, and then he himself appeared, tall, inhuman in appearance with cruel features, instilling a feeling of animal fear with just his appearance. Itachi walked past his partner. His voice became harsher. "We're late. Let's go." And they left the clearing. The confused half-human and the silent brother. Sasuke couldn't move. Whether his brother saw him or not, several minutes passed, but the tension still couldn't let go, and Sasuke couldn't leave the shelter. But what if the older brother didn't come over just because his partner was nearby? Uchiha bit his lip and waited for a while longer. The forest was filled with silence. The clearing had long since become empty and even the heartbeat had calmed down. Sasuke didn't come out of hiding right away. No one attacked or came out to him. Returning to the river was risky, but he still had to go along it. Now Uchiha walked more carefully, listened, froze and waited. And he did not stop thinking about Itachi. His brother could have noticed him, could have followed him, or was even following him now. The plan could have collapsed. But his brother didn't show up now, or in 10 minutes, or in the evening. By the end of the day, they had to go around Kakashi's team at as great a distance as possible. Kakashi's dogs, which were used for searching, could lead to an adult Sasuke, and this would lead to another catastrophe. Uchiha found the person he needed to replace his body quite unexpectedly. He met him by the lake in a small settlement. Sasuke approached the man without hiding. He lightly squeezed the training shaft, which served as any kind of weapon, and asked tensely from afar, "Are you new here?" Sasuke activated his Sharingan. There was no one nearby. He took the body and hoped that the changes would be very minor and would not affect the upcoming war, since the man was a completely ordinary person. Uchiha hid him not far from the shelter where Zetsu would bring Itachi's body. He devoted the next couple of days to preparation. The kidnapped man was immersed in a deep trance. Life in him had to beat until the right moment. The plan kept running through my head over and over again. You can't make a mistake, Sasuke told himself. There had to be a backup route if things went wrong. He thought through every turn, even to the point that for some reason Zetsu would transport Itachi to another location. There might not be enough time to search. With that in mind, the Uchiha had built a network of seals across a huge area of forest near the hideout and the temple. He hid each one in a tree trunk, in a rock, or in the ground. Such a network would allow him to sense what was happening within the covered area, and help him navigate. The technique was expensive, but the Uchiha saw no other way out. If Tobi suddenly approached, he would know. If Zetsu transported Itachi to another location, at least he would know which areas to exclude from the search. As he was placing the final seal south of the temple, Sasuke suddenly felt someone step onto the ground from the north. There were two intruders. The Uchiha guessed who they were almost immediately. He removed his hand from the stone, waited a moment, then stood up and headed towards the shelter. The feeling of inevitability was already taking over completely. Sasuke forced himself to go over the plan again. Everything had to go as it was supposed to. But his heart still beat harder each time. At dawn, Sasuke drew level with the temple. On one side was already Kakashi's squad, on another, his brother, on the third, the former team. He did not use the network to know about it. Sasuke knew that he should not stop, but he stopped. It was still quiet. Memories climbed into his head. As if now he himself was inside the temple, breathing in the musty and cold air, seeing his brother's impenetrable face and his own blinded rage. Emotions crawled up his throat. The Uchiha sped up. He should not be here. Half an hour later, the first very quiet explosion was heard. His heart jumped. Sasuke did not turn around. The second was just as muffled. Everything that happened 16 years ago was happening again in this world, behind the adult Sasuke. The Uchiha turned around. Clouds were hanging far above the forest. The temple was no longer visible from here, and the dark clouds looked like a speck. There were two people in the distance, himself and his brother, whom he had seen alive for the last time. Sasuke forced himself to turn away, fighting the gnawing regret, and moved on. He wanted to break free from the captivity of the past, but he himself dove back in again and again. It was dark and cold, and also very quiet. Only bats were scurrying somewhere in the depths of the cave. Sasuke had explored this shelter well before he had set up a net in the forest. Here he waited for Zetsu. Thoughts were swirling in his head. Itachi had ruined his destiny. Sasuke had made his own life unbearable. He hated and regretted. He felt everything at once: confusion, regret, and helplessness. He still felt it. At 32, he felt like a dead man. Questions swirled over him. But now, at least, he knew what he was running from and why he needed his brother. He only understood that even if he succeeded in everything, bringing his brother back, resurrecting him by some miracle and convincing him that he had done everything right, he would not be able to get to the surface of the sea in which he was drowning. Running his hand over his face and coming to his senses, Sasuke concentrated on the plan. He was afraid of not having time to replace the body. How long would he have to wait? Itachi's body might not be able to withstand it and his brother might die. But what if he didn't visit the fox and didn't buy the medicine Sakura made? Then he would already be dead. Sasuke had taken this possibility into account, but he still felt cold. Time was running out, the heart was speeding up its rhythm, breathing was becoming harder, but Zetsu was still not there. Sasuke heard a rustling sound. Mice squeaked. A moment later, Zetsu appeared. It was dark, but Uchiha saw the enemy slowly rise from the ground and just as slowly spit out Itachi's body. His heart skipped a beat. Uchiha didn't know if the drug had worked, if Itachi had taken it from the fox, if she had mixed something up. He unconsciously pressed his back against the bare stone and strained his eyes. Saliva accumulated in his throat. Zetsu straightened up in front of his brother's body. We have to go. Leave him like this? He will decide for himself what to do with it. The main thing is the eyes. Sasuke closed his eyes, listening. Zetsu's voices alternated. Will he extract them himself? Yes. Uchiha exhaled carefully and inhaled just as carefully. He forced himself to calm his trembling for a moment. He ran his fingertips along the stone wall and felt the round dust beneath them, beginning to count silently. Zetsu had to go, but how long would it take? Zetsu suddenly turned around. Is there anyone here? He asked himself. Sasuke's eyes widened. His hand trembled, his fingers no longer touching the stone. Sweat broke out. Heard? His heart began to pound desperately. Sasuke even thought that his heartbeat was deafening the silence. He cursed under his breath and pressed his lips tighter, tensed his whole body, almost pressing himself against the stone and froze in anticipation. Who? The world collapsed. Zetsu's voices struck again and again like a sharp dagger. The enemy turned away and leaned towards Itachi. Looks like he's alive. Not dead? Alive, the first voice repeated. Sasuke glanced one way, then the other. He had to think of something urgently. The mice began to tremble, and their squeaks and fussing could be heard from the depths of the cave. Sasuke noticed a small round stone under his foot and picked it up. He remembered that any interference could change the future. Especially if it concerned Obito and his henchmen. Then it was unknown to which world he would have to return, if he had to. But his brother worried him even more. The thoughts made me shudder again. He peered at the frozen enemy. Then he threw the pebble aside. The bats fluttered and flew down from the ceiling. Zetsu winced and ducked. A black squeaking wave flew around the circle and disappeared into the passage. The squeaking slowly died down. Zetsu straightened up unsteadily. These are mice. Sasuke waited tensely. Zetsu stared at Itachi again. They were mice. No. Not mice. Zetsu turned and Sasuke took off. Something clanked against the stone behind him. The next second, the Uchiha stood in front of his enemy, who had been caught off guard. You? Damn, Sasuke cursed. Zetsu's face changed again and his legs instantly merged with the stone. He turned gray, having managed to sink into the ground up to his knees. Sasuke rushed towards him, and the fishing line tightly squeezed the enemy. He did not have time to do anything, he was covered with paper seals. Sasuke yanked the line, through the kunai. The blade flashed near the Akatsuki's head and clanged against a stone and bounced off. Sasuke kicked. The seals worked, and Zetsu went silent. Passed out. Damn, Sasuke cursed again, loosened the line, and finally exhaled. It all happened so fast and unexpectedly. The Uchiha took the kunai and began to breathe as if he had just run too far. The kunai shook in his hand. This was the case when a miss was decisive. If he had hit Zetsu, there would have been marks that he could not hide. Sasuke tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. He coughed and turned around convulsively. Itachi lay motionless in the same place where he had been left. He seemed dead. A chill ran down his spine. Sasuke jumped to his brother, bent over his chest and listened. One single heartbeat, but it was enough. Sasuke exhaled, as if in gratitude to Itachi. Then he quickly returned to Zetsu and quickly tied him up, constantly looking back at his brother and saying, "Just a little bit more." Sasuke took out a syringe and injected Zetsu. He mumbled something and opened his eyes. Uchiha trembled and froze in anticipation. He met the eyes of the Akatsuki member, but he said nothing and passed out again. Sasuke exhaled in relief. Without wasting time, Uchiha jumped up to his brother. He took out a syringe and a vial of the substance that Orochimaru had given him and injected the medicine into his brother. He touched Itachi's face with his hand and waited with bated breath. After a few seconds, his brother inhaled slightly. Together with his own clone, Sasuke pulled Itachi out of the hideout. The body was shaking. Another time travel made me sick. It was turning inside out as if the bones themselves were asking to get out. With each jump it was getting worse by several times. Sasuke somehow made it to Orochimaru. He wanted to drink and be sure that everything went as it should. Obito would not notice the substitution, and Zetsu would believe that he himself had injected himself with the syringe Itachi had. Sasuke could not believe that he had left the past, that he had pulled his brother out and was now with Orochimaru. It seemed that nothing had changed. "Are you breathing normally?" the Sannin asked, attending to the elder Uchiha. Sasuke looked at him as if in a delusion and ignored the former sensei's question. "How is Itachi?" Orochimaru didn't answer right away. Sasuke gritted his teeth. "Orochimaru." The man smirked as he manipulated the older Uchiha's body. "If you continue jumping, you will become the same." "This means it's bad," Sasuke thought. He rose to his feet and came closer. "What are you going to do with your eyes?" Orochimaru asked, ignoring him. "We need to beat Edo Tensei." Sannin grinned. He drawled, "Kabuto, and 2 jumps." He reminded. "I think I should start preparing for your return now." Sasuke looked at his former teacher with irritation and he, as if sensing it, said, "Our agreement stands, Uchiha Sasuke." Sasuke looked at Itachi, whose eyes were covered with a bandage. The last thing he wanted was to show his weakness. He said nothing more and left Orochimaru's hideout. Stepping out into the fresh air, he waited for the dizziness to pass and his body to calm down. He needed to think about Edo Tensei. But first, he needed to rest well and regain his strength, otherwise he would collapse right here. Sasuke was ready to make a deal with any of the demons, if only to float to the surface from the depths of his dead life and correct past mistakes. And also, of course, to pull out his older brother. He looked at the darkened sky. The air was dry, and the black clouds hung too low. His eyes narrowed, and vulnerability and guilt awoke in his chest. The black clouds consisted of dust and smoke. There was a war here. Death or life . Explosions were heard in the distance. Sasuke looked away from the sky and leaned against a tree. It was his own fault that this was happening. The world was plunged into chaos, and his brother was dying. It was as if he had been returned to the finish line, and he would have to start all over again. Somewhere in his soul, a new pain began to ache. His consciousness kept repeating, this world was not real, could not be real. Where he and Itachi would be together, the sky would be clear and the sun would shine peacefully. The Uchiha lowered himself, the jump still reminded him of itself, closed his eyes and tried to focus on the next steps with Edo Tensei, ignoring thoughts about the ongoing war. For his brother, he was ready to do anything, in any way, no matter how much effort it cost him. Itachi did that. Sasuke was just following his example. "I have to." For Itachi, "I have to," Sasuke repeated to himself. He will have to rely on Orochimaru, because there is no other way. Just 2 jumps. Edo Tensei. Orochimaru. His eyes closed, Sasuke fell asleep. The dark world thickened, and in his head he made a promise to himself and his brother, "I'll fix everything, it just takes time." He shuddered, opening his eyes. There was a smell of burning and dust. Everything was quiet. So the wind had brought the smell, Sasuke thought. He listened to his body. The weakness was still very noticeable, but the Uchiha still rose to his feet. The muffled flapping of bird wings was heard from the side. Sasuke turned sharply. A forest jay landed in front of his feet. A small piece of paper, rolled into a narrow tube, was attached to its paw. Mistrust crept in. The Uchiha looked back towards the shelter. Perhaps Orochimaru was talking to someone? Sasuke crouched down and carefully removed the message. The note was intended for him. Uchiha could practically hear Sakura screaming, "Where are you?" Sasuke saw her cheeks begin to flush with anger, her eyes pleading and afraid. The letter was filled with desperation. Konoha was in trouble. The shinobi world was at war. "I hope you're okay. We need you." There was a stinging sensation under his eyelids. Sasuke shook his head and looked again towards the shelter where his brother was. If he weren't here, there would be peace among the shinobi. No. If it weren't for Sasuke, there would be no war, Konoha wouldn't be in trouble, and Sakura wouldn't be begging. He crumpled the note and threw it at his feet. His lungs cramped. Sasuke cleared his throat, pressed the back of his hand lightly on his eyes, feeling a slight moisture on his eyelashes, and walked away from his former sensei's shelter. He returned to Orochimaru at the end of the third day, to a lab littered with calculations and blueprints of the chakra system, over which the Sannin was bending. Itachi was on the table, unchanged, hooked up, covered in tubes and seals, just like 3 days ago. Sasuke tore his gaze away from him with difficulty and looked at Orochimaru. Orochimaru, as if sensing his gaze, turned around and handed over a couple of pills. "Not effective, but after a jump it will help you not to lose your footing." Uchiha took the medicine without a word and looked at his brother again. Orochimaru continued to rummage through the papers, simultaneously noting something in the notebook under his hand. "It's too early," he said. "You'll die." Sasuke himself understood that it was too early to return to the past, his body would not withstand it, and he needed to think carefully. He looked at his brother, pale, with tubes. Helpless. He must not die. Not in this life. Otherwise, everything would be in vain. Especially the war, because if Itachi died, Sasuke would not bring him back and would hardly return himself and do something with the Edo Tensei. He would let everything take its course, leave everything as it was. Probably. He noticed too late that Orochimaru was looking at him. The former sensei seemed to know what was hidden in the deepest corners of Sasuke's soul, as if he was reading him from the inside. He turned away slightly, picked up a scroll with a drawing of an unfamiliar seal from the table and, looking at it, said, "It's more complicated than I expected." Sasuke tensed up. The very expression "more difficult than I thought" from the master's lips foreshadowed that the situation was indeed more difficult. "I miss some lost techniques." More specifically, Sasuke said impatiently through his teeth. And he himself was starting to shake. If only this didn't concern Itachi, he thought along the way. Sasuke could already feel it on his skin, something familiar, sticky, but long forgotten, was floating around. And he recognized this feeling inevitability. He glanced at Itachi, and Orochimaru said, "I can't get your brother out." Silence surrounded Sasuke, squeezing him from all sides, not letting go. He froze. Orochimaru stood before him, his brother was slightly to the side, hooked up to tubes, and between them all, inevitability. "No. It can't be," Sasuke said, but to himself. He thought Orochimaru had heard him, but the same oppressive silence remained between them. Goosebumps ran under his skin. Sasuke shook off the obsession, looked straight into the Sannin's eyes, and Orochimaru understood what was going on in his soul. "And Tsunade?" Sasuke asked, hoping to the very end that he wouldn't have to involve her in all this, much less tell her about Itachi. Edo Tensei took his soul. He can't come back. No shinobi 100 times more brilliant than Tsunade herself can bring your brother back here, Orochimaru said. Sasuke felt himself turning pale with every word he heard. The former sensei said something about the resurrection technique and the disruption to the world due to interference. If you fail to replace your brother's summoned soul, there will be deviations. But this can be bypassed. How? Replace your brother's information before the call. The truth is, it will all be useless. He finally fell silent and looked at Sasuke seriously. There is something. It is an early Edo Tensei technique. It is in the shelter in the land of wind, I need it. He turned to the table, found a map and called the Uchiha. The Sannin silently wrote the date over the map with a marker. Early developments of Edo Tensei, deviate towards medicine. This is an old scroll. The technique is not on blood. It will help. Sasuke stared at the date and place for a moment, silently. Orochimaru stepped away for a few seconds. I thought I wouldn't need them, he said, and Sasuke glanced sideways at his brother again. I didn't have time to relocate them before 2 of the Akatsuki destroyed it. Orochimaru cleared his throat. We'll have to make a 3rd jump. 3rd jump. Damn. Sasuke heard his own heart jump and he couldn't breathe. A black, silent shadow loomed behind me. Orochimaru handed over another pill, different from the first ones. Take this, extra. Try to take it right away. He lifted the light pill in his palm so that Sasuke could see it well. This is for the 3rd jump. If you can, show up closer to this shelter. He cleared his throat again. If everything is. I'll do everything, Sasuke interrupted. He took the medicine. He looked straight into the Sanin's eyes again. But if you do something. Orochimaru shook his head and walked towards Itachi. I'm being honest with you, he replied, and Sasuke caught something alarming in the tone of his voice, as if the man was hiding something. No matter how much his body resisted the jump, Sasuke still completed the movement technique and immediately took the medicine. For some time, he could not move. The world was blurry, his body did not obey. When the medicine took effect, the air seemed fresh. The war had not yet begun here. Sasuke first visited the creator of the technique and took 2 more scrolls from him. Finding out when he began creating the technique. And having found out, he silently left the house. He moved towards the one he had left here instead of Itachi. Returning to a brother, even if not a real one, was difficult. Dead. Pale, motionless. Itachi's appearance, but not him. Having placed the seal on him, he left the burial site. This man would rise as his brother, but disappear as an ordinary one. Sasuke had to wait a long time to enter the game he had planned. To win it. Or lose it. Too dangerous, because he himself should not be here. He had no right to make a mistake. Sasuke acted as if someone was standing behind him, giving him hints, outsmart Kabuto, replace the information, stop his 16-year-old self from going down a stupid path. Dispel the resurrection technique. Day turned to night, and this repeated itself, seemingly endlessly. Sasuke tried not to notice and not to give an account, to ignore emotions. Otherwise, he thought, he would ruin everything, stumble. Edo Tensei came to an end unexpectedly, leaving behind fragments of what happened, emotions, and at the same time, both strength and chakra disappeared. But Sasuke was sure that his brother's soul would not get stuck. If you still believe Orochimaru, everything was finished here. Is it possible to die during another time travel? Uchiha asked himself when the Edo Tensei was over and the shinobi world was left to war. Itachi said that someone needed to bring Sasuke back to influence the future. And that someone knew the younger Uchiha and his weak points very well. He was walking towards the creator of the transfer technique. His chakra had not yet recovered, the future where Itachi was hidden was ahead. There was time, Sasuke repeated to himself. The main thing was not to make mistakes and not to die. The last transfer, he thought, seemed to have begun to destroy the body. And an additional jump had appeared ahead, and without it there was no way to return. If I die, Sasuke thought, and his thoughts were interrupted by the image of his brother. He stopped. There was no way back, and even if there was, Sasuke would never take it again. He needed to return to a world where it was relatively calm, the sun was shining, and his brother was alive. A second chance. As he made his penultimate leap, Sasuke wondered what Itachi would say when he woke up in a time completely unfamiliar to him. Uchiha was thrown out several years ago, when order still reigned in the world. He threw up as soon as he hit the ground. Sasuke took a few steps back, getting the medicine. He coughed, his legs buckling. The world in front of his eyes was dimming and spinning. How will you cope with the last jump? A voice in Sasuke's head asked. You have to, the same voice answered. When his vision cleared, Sasuke, without being distracted by anything on the way, not by people, not by an extra night's lodging, not by extra food, as if in a fog, reached the necessary village. He did not find the man right away and did not recognize him right away. Only his restless behavior gave him away. He looked around and was afraid, just as nervous. Over the years, he will age, and a lot. and he will change. Sasuke intercepted the still young creator of the technique when he was returning home. He thrust some kind of scroll into his hands and looked at him point blank. The one I'm talking about here will come for your movement technique. He pointed his finger at the scroll with the information. The man pressed himself against the wall and looked at Sasuke without saying a word, his eyes wide and his lower lip trembling. A bead of sweat rolled down the Uchiha's face. He squeezed the collar of the creator's shirt and looked into his eyes again. If you give him the technique, you'll destroy the world. Sasuke took out a paper seal and thrust it into the man's hands as well. Use it against him. And when? The man dared to ask, but under the stranger's gaze he quickly left without answering, and the Uchiha himself leaned his back against the wall. Orochimaru would come to this man. Sasuke now had no doubt that the former sensei was behind the movement into the past. Orochimaru always knew that the Uchiha would not be able to not interfere with the past. Cunning bastard, Sasuke hissed to himself and inhaled. So, it was necessary to remove the man, and as soon as he opened the scroll with the information, he would disappear forever. No one would be able to use the technique anymore, neither he, nor the enemies, nor the creator himself. Because it would not exist. Sasuke wiped the sweat from his face and listened to his rapid heartbeat. Suddenly, he felt cold on his lips, and then the cold spread to his shoulders, his fingertips tingled and he realized that he was falling. Sasuke opened his eyes. Street urchins ran away from him, screaming. That was all Sasuke needed, he thought, and checked to see if the street kids had managed to steal the last pill. It was there. Damn. Sasuke cursed and stood up. So much time had passed, and his body was not recovering. The Uchiha winced, imagining the distance he still had to cover, not one day, and probably not even a week. He reached the right shelter a couple of weeks later, at night. The wind howled, it was quite quiet and dusty. The grains of sand in the dry air scratched his skin aggressively. When Uchiha entered the shelter, with a lit torch, he illuminated dozens of scrolls, if not hundreds. Keeping the description in mind, Sasuke began searching. Scrolls flew to the floor. Sasuke rummaged through the piles of shelves. He picked up one, unsealed it, glanced at it, and threw it to the floor. The air was stale and musty, the fire dimly lit the room. The walls themselves were oppressive. The scrolls echoed as they hit the floor. Darkness. A loud knock. And time. And something dark, looming behind him, was urging Sasuke on. Faster. Faster. He was going through the techniques as fast as he could. His teeth were clenched and his eyes were tense. The churning in his chest was getting stronger with each subsequent scroll. Wrong, Sasuke snorted and threw the useless paper. He took a new one and opened it again. Naruto and his clones would have come in very handy here, and a second hand would have come in handy here too. Sasuke threw another unnecessary scroll. The more he looked through, the faster he sped up. Taking out another one, he opened it and accidentally tore the paper. He froze. Itachi flashed before his eyes, from the dream, when Sasuke had just gotten involved in this story with the movements, alive. Nearby. His lips twisted, and Sasuke again threw out the inappropriate technique. Frantically sorting through them, he accidentally touched the shelf, and the scrolls rolled across the floor. Sasuke touched his forehead, looking at the scattered techniques. Damn. He exhaled and sank to the floor, silently began to rummage through the scrolls. Some opened and mixed with those he had already looked at. Damn. Sasuke stood up and looked around. The useless knowledge in this musty shelter seemed to mock him with identical yellowed sheets. Sasuke concentrated. His soul ached. Calm. Calm. The Uchiha walked over to the opposite cabinet and extended his hand, froze, put it on the lower shelves and took out the first technique he came across, opened the scroll. He closed his eyes, inhaled, dropped the technique and reached for the next one. The technique he needed so much was slipping away like a bird. Sasuke looked around again, went to another cabinet and began to look through the techniques there. There was no scroll, or rather, there was a pile of them, some empty, others with useless information, others with useless techniques. Sasuke went through them one by one. It was hard to keep his cool. The Uchiha saw how distance and time separated him from his target. But, besides, death itself hung over his head. Not only his, but his brother's, like an inevitability. If only Orochimaru wouldn't deceive him, if only he could survive after returning, if only the plan with Edo Tensei worked. Itachi, he heard in his head, Itachi. Itachi. It was already morning when Sasuke left the hideout with the scroll he needed. Although it seemed like he had been there for days, Sasuke had the necessary technique and the scroll with movement. Now he only needed to get to Orochimaru's hideout near Konoha. Did Sasuke jump into the future or did he fail? Uchiha thought about it sitting on the pier and looking at the blue mirror of the lake. Coolness rose to his feet, and the sun was baking from above. Serenity was attractive. He wanted to stay here. Here, that was in childhood. The clan's training ground. How long ago it was. Quiet footsteps were heard on the wooden pier. The one they belonged to was leaving. Sasuke suddenly looked back and recognized his brother and the one leaving. On his back was the clan emblem, and it was moving away. Uchiha stood up, called out to Itachi, but he did not turn around. Why did he not turn around? Everything around him swam. The sky closed in a cone, and the blackness from the lake crawled out. Sasuke swallowed and tried to call his brother again, but not a sound escaped his lips. Sasuke could not call out to him, and he was leaving. Then Uchiha wanted to run, but fell. He opened his eyes and found himself in the darkness. The cold burned his skin, and the smell of mold from the walls hit his nose, like back in the Uchiha hideout where he met Itachi for the final battle. His body no longer obeyed him, and the pain pierced even his lungs. The cold was getting deeper and deeper, and Sasuke couldn't do anything. His eyes closed. If I die, Sasuke thought at the last second, Itachi. He saw a shadowy figure descend above him and touch his forehead, and then Sasuke fell into darkness completely. He woke up from a tingling sensation in his hand. It had gone numb. He sat up and looked around. Yes, he had completed the jump. The third and last one. The scroll with Orochimaru's technique was lying nearby. Sasuke grabbed it and stood up, but immediately bent over. The light flickered unpleasantly in his eyes, dark spots began to run around. He looked for the pill, the last one, but did not find it. Took it, he was surprised. When did he manage to do it? The night forest remained silent. The air was clear, the sky was black, deep night. Sasuke did not know what had happened, but he looked around again, listened and sniffed, afraid that he had returned to an even worse world than before. It was too quiet. Maybe something was wrong here? Or was everything normal? Sasuke walked a few meters, stopped and caught his breath. Then a few more. It wasn't far to the Sanin's hideout. It was somewhere nearby, that was for sure. Sasuke walked, and the world was deafeningly silent. The treasured rock, the entrance to the shelter, stood as a black shadow before his eyes. Very close. Sasuke went inside and managed to take a couple of steps. Orochimaru, he called, squeezing the scroll with the technique in his fingers. He took a few more steps and stopped. He couldn't go far. Orochimaru had to be here. And his brother. Itachi. Sasuke looked ahead. There was no point in stopping. He walked towards the door again. A few more steps. A ghostly echo from the stone walls and a lurking silence. Damn. He reached his hand to the door and opened it. Light slowly appeared behind it and Sasuke was afraid to see something in it, or rather, to see something he didn't want to. Why hadn't Orochimaru responded? What had happened? What had gone wrong? Sasuke stood in the doorway, took a few breaths and staggered. Orochimaru turned to him and froze, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. I found her, Uchiha said through his teeth and looked for his brother. Still here, in place. My heart felt lighter. Orochimaru approached and clutched the scroll, but Sasuke did not let go of it. He looked deep into the Sanin's eyes. If you deceive me, I will kill you. Orochimaru carefully took the scroll and, without taking his eyes off the Uchiha, replied. Should I compete with you? He walked over to Itachi. Sasuke. He said, I don't promise. Sasuke just gritted his teeth. Bastard. What about the war? Uchiha asked. Orochimaru was silent for a moment before answering. It's peaceful now. He fiddled for a long time. Too long. Sasuke was close. He didn't dare look at the Sannin or his brother, he couldn't even guess how much time had passed. Orochimaru had made him drink something, told him to keep from kicking over completely. Sasuke drank and now waited. At least it was quiet now. And he hadn't died. It was up to Orochimaru. And his brother. Itachi. Sasuke glanced at him sideways. Silently. Waiting. Remembering the first dream he'd had when he'd ended up in the past. That awkward kiss. This night could end in either death or life. Orochimaru cursed under his breath as he used another technique. Sasuke turned away helplessly, actually freezing in horror. Why was Orochimaru nervous? Or was he failing? Sasuke waited. There was nothing he could do here. He clenched his teeth and held his breath, silently counting to 20, then 30, then 50, and starting over. 1, 2, 3, he swallowed and was caught up in the moment. Emptiness, silence, Orochimaru and his brother. Period or comma? Death or life? Sasuke couldn't sleep, couldn't speak. His body was too tired, cold and hot at the same time. The light flickered, playing with imagination and time in a nasty way. How long, Sasuke thought, becoming even more convinced that waiting in silence and uncertainty were the worst enemies, because thoughts in his head began to swarm and build the worst possible scenarios. He stole glances at the Sannin, who was endlessly trying to use the same technique. His face was sprinkled with sweat, his eyes were narrowed, and his mouth was slightly twisted. His hands touched his brother's chest and froze. Orochimaru had done this more than a dozen times that night. The same thing, but nothing changed. And the sky outside was already lighting up. The wind blew through the window. The curtain swayed slightly, and behind it was the sea and the blue sky, with white clouds slowly floating across it. Peaceful times for the shinobi. As it should be. Sasuke had been silent for some time, holding his breath. He caught the breath of the wind on his face. It smelled like the sea. The singing of forest birds and the cries of seagulls reached his ears. It was light and clear outside, but tension had settled within the walls of this house. Itachi sat opposite and looked at his brother with a long gaze. Silently, going over the story he had just heard in his head. Silently disagreeing, condemning and amazed at the same time. Sasuke waited, looking straight into his eyes. Orochimaru was right, Itachi would hardly thank his younger brother for what he had done. At least, not now. Do you condemn? What I did? Itachi looked away. His lips were pressed together, and Sasuke realized that his brother wanted to speak out, but was silent. Or maybe he just didn't know where to start, how to say it, or understood the futility of judging. Sasuke exhaled, resigning himself and watching his brother. Of course you judge, he paused. I understand. Itachi's eyes flashed and he might have been about to say something, but Sasuke beat him to it. You'll get used to it. To a peaceful life. Yes. Itachi needed some getting used to. Orochimaru was right about that, too. You're the one who's going to get him back on his feet, he said as he left. You should learn how to do it yourself. Look who's talking. Sasuke swallowed and winced when he heard the angry notes in his brother's voice. What kind of illusion are you creating for yourself? Do you think that everything will be different now? Everything will be different now, came the confident answer. Itachi shook his head slightly, disagreeing. No, Sasuke, he rose from the bed. Tension and despair grew with him, now standing at his full height. Wherever we are, no matter how much time has passed, the past cannot be fixed or escaped. Not for you, and certainly not for me. Itachi raised his hand slightly, as if interrupting his brother's speech, looked at the floor and inhaled, wanting to continue the conversation, but he fell silent again. Yes, the past cannot be rewritten. Mistakes cannot be corrected. And you will not correct them, I will not correct them. I understand that, Sasuke said. Itachi calmly turned away, letting him finish, but they can be understood. And forgiven, too. There was silence. The word forgive hit his brother hard, and Sasuke only just realized how hard. Itachi glanced at him briefly and walked out into the street without closing the door. Sasuke sighed and looked out the window again, watching him. Itachi, unhurried, as if not knowing where to go, was heading towards the foamy waves rolling onto the white sand. He needed time, the Uchiha told himself, to process everything again and accept it. He did not immediately follow his brother. He stopped a couple of meters away from him on the shore and also looked forward, where the sky touched the sea. The brothers were silent, each indulging in their own thoughts. They were surrounded by a world that they had perhaps both dreamed of their entire lives. Calm, without shadows or blood, wash your hands and never return to the past. Konoha was full of those who would protect it, Sasuke thought. Maybe two brothers would live there who would not get lost in wars and eternal struggle, who would not waste time on hatred and silence, and he mentally wished them a happy life, the kind he and Itachi had never had and the kind he wanted to live himself. Maybe in the next life, he and Itachi would not get lost in war and hatred either? Sasuke narrowed his eyes slightly. Yes. In the next life, for sure.